Energy Subcommittee, oversight of NRC ensuring efficient and predictable nuclear safety regulation for a prosperous America to order. Let me thank everyone for being here today, and I welcome all 5 NRC commissioners. I look forward to your testimony today. It's been over 2 years since we've heard directly from the commission, and about 9 years since we've had a full panel of all 5 commissioners before the committee. This is an exciting time in nuclear energy, and it's an important time to make sure our laws and policies are up to date and will enable the full promise of nuclear energy. Today, we'll hear from you, the commissioners, who set the policies for NRC, to discuss and understand how you're preparing the NRC for the future. What is working, what is not working, and what needs to be done. We have a bipartisan goal in this committee of advancing durable nuclear policy that will expand nuclear energy and its many benefits for our nation. Part of this work involves examining the NRC to ensure its licensing, its regulation, and oversight of safety and security is predictable, efficient, risk-informed, performance-based, and protective of health and safety. A well-functioning NRC that meets these goals helps achieve the broader policy goal established by Congress, which is to enable the expansion of nuclear. That will be key to a more prosperous America. In April, Chair Rogers, Ranking Member Plone, Subcommittee Ranking Member DeGette, and I wrote a number of stakeholders for recommendations that might be needed to improve the NRC and the federal nuclear policies in general. As we work on this legislation, your testimony today should help those efforts. We can all agree here on the numerous benefits of maintaining a robust U.S. nuclear industry. The current nuclear fleet consists of 94 reactors, with Vogtle Unit Number 3 coming online just last month, and Number 4 by the end of the year, first of next year. This was the first nuclear unit built in the United States in more than 3 decades. This fact is reflective of the fact that our current licensing structure is not set up to encourage large-scale growth or investment of large-scale nuclear projects, i.e. VC Summer in South Carolina as an example. Nuclear energy accounts for nearly 20% of our nation's total electricity and more than half of the country's carbon-free electricity. In my home state of South Carolina, nuclear power generates over 90% of our carbon-free electricity and over half of our total electricity, around 58%. We understand nuclear in South Carolina. The benefits of nuclear energy range from grid reliability, emission reduction, and national security. New and advanced reactor technology provides exciting promise for the future of the industry. In order to achieve this promise, NRC must be ready. Its work to license nuclear technologies and assure adequate safety of the industry is central to nuclear expansion. NRC should not be an impediment to the advancement of nuclear power and nuclear energy in this country, but it should rather fulfill its mission, and that's to foster nuclear power in the United States of America. The NRC has been talking about preparing for the future for a very long time. More than 5 years ago, the NRC's then Executive Director of Operations initiated a transformation effort. Building on other recent reforms, that effort led to continued work on transformation, all to meet the needs of existing and future fleets. Shortly after that, the end of 2018, Congress passed the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act, or NEMA, which pressed the NRC to develop new regulatory framework to license advanced reactors. I'm hopeful we'll get a sense today how these agency and congressional efforts have been working. From what we learned in our April meeting with industry experts, might not be going so well. The NRC has been slow to update its environmental reviews and site and construction permits. It has sent uncertain signals about the policy direction of the Commission, leading to uncertainty in the marketplace. And its implementation of new regulatory framework for advanced reactors has, to date, been a profound disappointment. I'm hopeful we can hear some positive news today. Chair Hanson and other commissioners speak positively about preparing the NRC for the future. We want to hear about that. But I'd like to start seeing some concrete evidence that that progress is being made. Modernizing the agency does not mean moving away from your core principles of safety. It means ensuring regulations are updated to reflect the advances and capabilities of the nuclear industry today. The United States has the technological and engineering talent and capabilities to be the global leader in nuclear, and we've got to return to that. We need a regulator that reflects this to propel us into the nuclear future. I'm excited about the future of nuclear energy. This committee's excited about the future of nuclear energy on both sides of the aisle. We have a window of opportunity here to advance nuclear power in this country. It starts today with this hearing with the regulators themselves, and we'll create policy to help advance nuclear technology and nuclear energy production in this country. So I want to thank you all for being here, and I now will recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee to get for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of the NRC commissioners for being here today. You're right, it's nice to see 5 today. As the agency responsible for overseeing our nation's nuclear fleet and radioactive materials, the work that the NRC does is vital not only to our nation's overall energy security, but to the health and safety of the American public. Experts agree that nuclear energy has the potential to play a significant role in our efforts to drive down our nation's greenhouse gas emissions as we take on the climate crisis. But in my opinion, shared by most people here, I think we can only do that if we continue to prioritize public health and safety. Currently, nuclear energy is responsible for producing 20% of all the electricity generated in this country, and nearly half of all of the carbon-free electricity the U.S. generates each year. As we work to reduce our emissions from the U.S. energy sector, nuclear energy is often seen as a key technology that can continue to be used to provide the American people with the power they need to make the clean energy transition. So it goes without saying that the NRC would be at the forefront of that effort. While there are several potential benefits of increasing our use of nuclear technology here in the U.S., we simply can't do so unless we address a number of issues first. In April, as the chairman said, this committee sent a series of letters to some of the nation's largest nuclear stakeholders to solicit their feedback on NRC's licensing process. The overwhelming response we received from these companies was that the licensing process is overly burdensome and needs to be reformed. So, if we're going to make nuclear energy a key part of our clean energy transition, we have to streamline the process. But, and this is a big but, we have to do so in a way that will continue to ensure the highest level of public health and safety. Streamlining the process without increasing safety is not an option. Now, the NRC has a long record of making safety a priority, and we have to keep it that way. We need to develop a long-term, comprehensive, and community-driven strategy for dealing with spent nuclear fuel. For far too long, we as a nation have simply ignored this problem, and if we're going to expand this resource, we cannot do it anymore. Expanding nuclear energy without a long-term strategy to deal with the spent fuel, the fuel rods that will come as a result, will only leave more communities vulnerable to an unwanted buildup of nuclear waste in their area. So while I believe deeply that these are issues that must be resolved before we begin to expand the use of this technology in the U.S., I also think that solutions are possible. Through meaningful engagement and dialogue, we can address each of these issues and start moving forward in looking at the use of this critical technology. But if we don't, if we fail to address the issue of spent fuel, or if we fail to take the steps needed to ensure that the highest standards of protecting the public's health and safety remain in place, then I frankly don't see a way that nuclear energy will become a significant part of our clean energy future. So let me just close by saying, I believe there's a real opportunity to drive down our emissions and accelerate our clean energy transition through increased nuclear power, but only if it's done the right way, and only if it's done collaboratively. So I'm looking forward to hearing the testimony and the discussion today, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Generally yields back. It's now my distinct pleasure to recognize the chair of the full committee on Energy and Commerce, Ms. McMorris-Rogers, for 5 minutes for our opening statement.
American leadership in nuclear energy and energy technology is critical to our economic security and our national security. It's how we win the future with reliable, affordable, and clean energy to power our way of life, keep the lights on, build stronger communities, and keep our economies going. American leadership has been essential to civilian nuclear energy around the world. We can trace this vision back to the Atomic Energy Act of 1954, when Congress established and said in quote, I quote, to make the maximum contribution to the general welfare, the development, use, and control of atomic energy shall be directed as to promote world peace, improve general welfare, increase the standard of living, and strengthen competition and private enterprise. End of quote. With that policy, the United States led the world for over 40 years developing civilian nuclear technologies. We set the standard for safety and security that continues to this day. You can find American know-how in more than 80% of the nuclear reactors deployed around the world. These reactors trace to innovations by American companies that were spread by Congress's vision for what nuclear can provide. That is the vision of nuclear leadership we are working to restore during this Congress. The world today presents serious challenges to American nuclear leadership. China and Russia seek to dominate emerging nuclear markets to control supply chains for technology and fuels. Here at home, nuclear generating capacity has been nearly flat for 3 decades. We can reverse this trend, but there's work to do. For example, Congress enacted incentives for a resurgent nuclear industry in 2005. And in 2009, the NRC had received 8 applications for 28 new state-of-the-art reactors. To its credit, NRC issued licenses for the construction and operation of 14 new reactors over the following 9 years. Yet, for a variety of reasons, only 2 of those projects have been constructed, a plant of Vogtle in Georgia. The remaining licenses were terminated or an indefinite hold by the applicants. And so today, NRC operates as an agency that is overseeing the completion of 2 reactors from start to finish over the last 40 years. To restore American nuclear leadership, we need an NRC that performs its mission with the urgency reflected in the Atomic Energy Act. NRC must focus on providing reasonable assurance of adequate protection of public health and safety. That is its core mission. And I agree with NRC Chairman Hanson that, quote, NRC must do its best not to be an impediment, NRC must do its best not to be an impediment to innovation and deployment. End of quote. We need a modern regulator that works in service to the policies established by Congress. There is no time to waste. America has the best operating fleet in the world. The performance and safety of American nuclear plants are unmatched. There are many promising advanced nuclear technologies coming to the doorstep of NRC for licensing. Our allies in Eastern Europe and elsewhere yearn for American technology and support. We heard this when we were in Poland and the Czech Republic earlier this year. Our allies seek American leadership on safety and performance. We need an NRC that encourages innovation. Key questions for this hearing concern how the Commission plans to modernize and meet the urgency of the moment. Will it update its regulations to account for the best available data and operational experience? Where's the urgency enabling innovations that will improve efficiency of operations, oversight, and safety? Where's the urgency to implement the reforms directed by Congress to establish predictable, clear regulations appropriate to the risk of the technologies it licenses? And is NRC a results-driven agency? I'm looking forward to this hearing, looking forward to the discussion, the answer to these questions, and I yield back.
Generally yields back, and the chair will now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Pallone from New Jersey, for 5 minutes for opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nuclear power plays an important role in producing carbon-free power for the electric grid. In April, this subcommittee held a hearing examining the current and future nuclear energy landscape. I thought it was an informative and bipartisan hearing, and I look forward to building on that progress today as we conduct oversight of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Democrats have long been committed to decarbonizing the power sector to combat the worsening climate crisis. Over the past 2 years, congressional Democrats and President Biden took major action on climate by passing both the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. And these laws included historic climate investments to help us lead the rest of the world in the transition to clean energy, while also creating millions of good-paying clean energy jobs and lowering energy costs for Americans. In 2022, the power sector accounted for about 31% of total U.S. carbon dioxide emissions. If we're going to dramatically reduce power sector emissions while keeping prices low for consumers, we need reliable carbon-free resources that can sustain output for long periods of time. And nuclear power can meet this test, and that's why we look to bolster nuclear power in the two new laws, both the bipartisan infrastructure law we authorized in that, the Civil Nuclear Credit Program, a $6 billion fund at the Department of Energy to support our existing reactor fleet. And then, as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, we created a tax credit for zero-emission nuclear power and invested $700 million in a program to support the next generation nuclear fuel. Now, the NRC has done an admirable job over the years of ensuring nuclear power is safe and secure. The nuclear industry often touts its safety successes over the past decades, but that success is partly due to the efforts of federal regulators to stay on top of inspections and safety protocols at plants across the country. I'd also like to commend the NRC for creating an environmental justice review team 2 years ago to evaluate how the agency's policies and activities address environmental justice. The resulting set of recommendations is an important first step on environmental justice, and the report recommends that the NRC enhance its environmental justice outreach activities. It also recommends that the Commission reassess its ban on using funds to assist environmental justice communities in participating in NRC proceedings and other topics. This is also an issue that I discussed with the FERC commissioners when they were before the subcommittee yesterday. It's critical that our federal agencies and commissions acknowledge and include communities that have disproportionately faced the negative effects of energy generation and climate change. Now, the NRC is also in the process of creating a new regulatory framework for advanced nuclear reactors. This was something that Congress required the Commission to do in 2018 as part of the Bipartisan Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act. Earlier this year, NRC staff proposed a draft of this new framework, which is now referred to as Part 53. In April, I joined Chair Rogers and Duncan and Ranking Member DeGette in a request for information. We asked nuclear power stakeholders for comments and recommendations on the NRC licensing and regulatory process. And one common theme we heard in these responses is that the Draft 53 or Part 53 framework is too cumbersome and difficult to use. So I hope the Commission can make targeted revisions to the licensing framework so it can be used to safely and efficiently license advanced reactors in the future. Advanced reactors can be designed to provide enhanced safety features and produce less waste. They can come in different sizes, be constructed faster with lower construction costs, and be sited in more remote areas. Finally, I want to briefly mention the Commission's decommissioning rulemaking that will guide the process for shutting down and decommissioning shuttered nuclear reactors. A proposed version of this rule was published last year, but I remain seriously concerned that that rule provides an insufficient role for local communities to participate in the decommissioning process, and I hope this will be corrected before the rule is finalized. But it's good to see all 5 commissioners here today, and I look forward to your testimony. And yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman yields back, and that now concludes the members' opening statements. The chair would like to remind members that pursuant to committee rules, all members' opening statements will be made part of the record. So I thank all the witnesses for being here and taking time to testify. Each witness will have the opportunity for a 5-minute opening statement followed by a round of questions from members. There's some lights in front of you. If it goes to yellow, that means start trying to get to the end. If it goes to red, it's time to wrap it up. Just try to stay on time. And that goes for committee members as well. So let me introduce everyone. First off, we have the Honorable Christopher T. Hanson. He's chairman of the NRC, and we welcome the chairman. We also have Commissioner Jeff Barron. Jeff, thanks for being here. I'll skip over David for a second. We have the Honorable Annie Caputo. Thanks for being here, Commissioner. And Commissioner Bradley Crowell. Thanks for being here. Skipped over David Wright. He and I have known each other for about 20-plus years, and he is a fellow Clemson graduate, and go Tigers. So I look forward to hearing from everyone today. And Chairman Hanson, we're going to jump right into this, and you can start with your opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to Ranking Member DeGette and Chair McMorris Rogers and Ranking Member Pallone and other distinguished members of the subcommittee. My colleagues and I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission's fiscal year 2024 budget and to update you on some of the agency's licensing and oversight and rulemaking activities. The NRC is an independent federal agency established to regulate commercial nuclear power plants, research and test reactors, nuclear fuel cycle facilities, and radioactive materials used in medicine, academia, and industry. The agency also regulates the transportation, storage, and disposal of radioactive materials and waste, and the export and import of radioactive materials, nuclear reactors, and fuel cycle facilities, and finally, the export of nuclear facility components. The NRC's FY24 budget is right around $1 billion, which is a 6.7% increase or $63 million over the NRC's enacted budget for FY23. This increase is primarily to support salaries and benefits in accordance with U.S. Office of Management and Budget guidance. The budget also this year proposes to use $27 million in carryover to offset the nuclear reactor safety budget. The NRC expects to recover $832 million of the FY24 budget from fees assessed on NRC licensees. This will result in a net appropriation of $156 million. The NRC has realized several important accomplishments over the past year. To highlight a few, the NRC authorized the operation of Vogtle Unit 3 in Georgia, as Chairman Duncan noted. Summer Nuclear Company projects Vogtle Unit 4 will be operational by late 2023 or early 2024. Further, the NRC completed NuScale's design certification for its small modular reactor, and we also renewed the license of Westinghouse's fuel fabrication facility in Columbia, South Carolina for another 40 years. Our progress in the advanced reactor space is accelerating as the agency looks to the future while addressing present needs. Indeed, we're currently interacting with 15 companies. We have already dispositioned 51 technical reports and white papers, while we currently have 33 under review. Vendors, utilities, and project sponsors tell us to expect as many as 20 applications in the 2025 to 2027 timeframe. The staff reports, I have it here in my notes, that the staff reports that it's ahead of its 21-month review schedule for the Kairos Hermes test reactor. In fact, Mr. Chairman and Madam Ranking Member, I'm pleased to announce that we're going to issue the safety evaluation report for the Kairos Hermes test reactor later today, 3 months ahead of schedule and on budget for that construction permit. We are also making progress on our 18-month review schedule for the Abilene Christian construction permit for their advanced test reactor at the university there in Texas. And we have the TRISO-X application for their fuel fabrication facility in Tennessee to manufacture high-assay, low-enriched uranium fuel in Tennessee there for that facility. Resources in the budget will continue to support staff work on the technology-inclusive reactor licensing framework for advanced reactors, as a number of you have already mentioned, Part 53, ahead of the congressionally mandated schedule under NEMA. It'll also assist in the development of alternative physical security requirement for advanced reactors and a rulemaking for increased enrichment to support accident-tolerant fuels and advanced reactor fuel designs. The Commission recently directed the staff to develop a licensing framework for near-term fusion energy systems under a byproduct material framework, and a major step forward, I think, in fusion regulation. The FY24 budget request is anticipated to encompass the regulation of 94 operating power reactors, 31 non-power production or utilization facilities, 23 power reactor sites undergoing decommissioning, and numerous other facilities and materials that we regulate. In addition, the budget request supports increased international collaboration on SMRs and advanced reactor technical reviews. We've had quite some success through our memorandum of cooperation with the Canadian regulator in joint technical reviews, finishing 6 topical reports in highly complex areas of interest. Funding will also allow NRC to provide critical international assistance to countries with burgeoning regulatory programs while we rise to the emerging challenges around the world. The budget request supports our goals to continuing fostering a healthy organization and a hybrid work environment. We will continue to maintain a highly qualified workforce through recruitment and retention of staff, with greater emphasis on entry and mid-career level hiring to address projected attrition and prepare for anticipated increasing workload in future years. In FY22, we successfully hired over 250 people, and we're exceeding 50% of our hiring goal for FY23. In closing, the FY24 budget request allows the NRC to focus on conducting our mission activities and recruiting and retaining a highly diverse and skilled workforce to ensure the safety and security of nuclear power facilities and nuclear materials. On behalf of the Commission, I thank you for the opportunity to discuss the important work we anticipate in the year ahead and for your support of the NRC's vital mission. And I look forward to responding to your questions.
Thank you, Chairman Hanson. Now we recognize Commissioner Barron for your 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman, Ranking Member DeGette, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. It's always great to be back with my colleagues to discuss NRC's important work. I've been reflecting on the changes in the nuclear energy landscape since I left the Energy and Commerce staff and joined the Commission in 2014. A lot has changed. We've seen major shifts in NRC's workload, budget, staff size, hiring, and overall outlook for the future. When I arrived on the Commission, these factors were all on a downward slope. Our workload was shrinking, our staff and budget were shrinking, we had the Project AIM effort to reduce costs, narrowly avoided layoffs, and essentially had a hiring freeze. Nuclear power plants were shutting down. Back then, there was little talk of new construction beyond Vogtle. There was some interest in small modular reactors, but almost no real discussion of advanced non-light water reactors. Today, we're in a very different situation. Policymakers and the public are increasingly focused on climate change and on energy security. The urgency and scale of the challenge have led to a growing consensus that meeting ambitious climate and energy security goals will involve nuclear power, including new reactors. The bipartisan infrastructure legislation and the Inflation Reduction Act make large investments to drive this expansion, including through the Clean Electricity Production Tax Credit and funding for a domestic high-assay, low-enriched uranium supply chain. Few, if any, nuclear power plants are expected to close anytime soon, with more potential applications for advanced reactors, small modular reactors, subsequent license renewal, new fuel designs, power uprates, and risk-informed programs expected. NRC's overall workload is increasing. We are hiring again, and our budget requests are stabilizing or even growing a bit to allow us to do this new work. The outlook for nuclear has markedly changed, and it's an exciting time to be doing our important work. NRC has a key role to play in addressing climate change and energy security. It's our job to ensure the safety and security of nuclear power in the U.S. energy mix. To accomplish our mission, NRC needs an efficient, effective, and timely licensing process that can handle every application that comes our way. This is an important NRC responsibility. Based on pre-application interactions with potential licensees, the NRC staff anticipates that at least 20 advanced reactor designs, reactor license applications, and early site permit applications will be under review in the next few years. The Department of Energy, utilities, and vendors predict that applications for hundreds of additional reactors may follow in the coming decades. NRC must therefore be fully prepared for a surge in new reactor work. Readiness is a multifaceted challenge. NRC has intensified its focus on having sufficient resources and the right expertise to conduct these reviews. We're focused on retaining our talented staff and on the significant external hiring necessary to do the work in front of us now and to be ready for the work coming our way. The agency is also working hard to establish a risk-informed, performance-based, and technology-neutral regulatory framework for new reactors. At the same time, the staff is taking steps to make individual licensing reviews more efficient and predictable. The NRC staff is employing core review teams with stable staffing over time, doing more in-person checks of supporting information and fewer formal requests for information, addressing more substantive technical issues during pre-application engagement, elevating tough licensing issues more quickly for senior leadership or commission direction, using probabilistic risk assessments to focus reviews on safety significant items, and utilizing data analytics to quickly identify schedule risks. In addition, the staff has developed a draft generic environmental impact statement for advanced reactors. As Chair Hanson noted, these efforts are already having an impact with the Kairos application and the Abilene Christian University application. To sustain and build on this early progress, I believe that the Commission must provide leadership and accountability by communicating our expectations for new reactor licensing reviews. Since NRC was established, Commission policy statements have been used to share our expectations for the staff or regulated community on high-priority issues facing the agency. I think it makes sense for the Commission to issue a policy statement on the effectiveness, efficiency, and timeliness of new reactor licensing reviews. A Commission policy statement could address several key aspects of the agency's licensing work, including aggressive but achievable target schedules for the safety and environmental reviews of first-of-a-kind applications and subsequent reactor applications of the same design, the ability to apply regulatory findings and analyses from first-of-a-kind reviews to simplify subsequent reviews, innovative licensing approaches and techniques that will evolve over time to optimize reviews, and a risk-informed focus on safety and security. I think we all recognize that this is a critical moment for the nuclear sector. I want to see NRC meet the moment. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Barron. I'll now recognize Commissioner Wright for 5 minutes for opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Duncan, Ranking Member DeGette, and honorable members of the committee. And thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. And Chairman, thank you for your personal comments. As you know, we've been friends for a very long time. And if you remember, you were the very first person I called when I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer back in '08. So you're very important to me in my life, so thank you.
David, if you could pull the mic a little closer.
I'm sorry. All right.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start by thanking my colleagues on the commission and their staffs for being willing to work together on important issues before us, such as small modular reactors, advanced fuels, cleanup of legacy uranium mines, and spent fuel storage, just to name a few. I'm also grateful for the NRC staff, who are truly some of the smartest and most talented people I've been around. And as I've said before, they do an outstanding job of monitoring the day-to-day safety of our nuclear facilities, and I want to take the moment to acknowledge them. As you've heard, this is an exciting time for the Commission. The policy decisions that we have in front of us will play a pivotal role in shaping the energy future of this country, as well as beyond our borders, and I'm honored to be a part of that process. As I mentioned to you all the last time I was here, we know what success at the NRC looks like. Success means that we enable the safe use of nuclear technology and don't disable it. It means that we continue to accomplish our mission of reasonable assurance of adequate protection of public health and safety, and to promote the common defense and security and to protect the environment. The challenge is deciding how to reach that goal in the most effective, efficient, and reliable way. I believe the NRC is up to the challenge. This is a unique and special opportunity in time, and by working together, the 5 of us can help meet this moment. For example, I'm currently reviewing a brand new proposal by one of my colleagues on efficiencies related to advanced reactor reviews. I'm also working together with Commissioner Caputo on a new expedited proposal for establishing metrics in key areas so the staff has tools to show that they are meeting their goals with the urgency that is required for us to meet this moment in time. And by working together, we as a commission can do our part to help provide energy security, energy resilience, grid security, and national security, not just here in the United States, but for our allies around the world. So thank you for the opportunity to appear before you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And now go to Commissioner Caputo for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Duncan and Ranking Member DeGette, and to the members of the committee for holding this important hearing. Like Commissioner Barron, I have fond memories of my time in service to the members of this great committee, and I'm pleased to come before you today. The primacy of the NRC's mission is indisputable, but we must innovate how we accomplish that mission and do so with a sense of urgency in recognition of our national and global clean energy needs. We must innovate how we regulate, improve our performance, and cultivate results-driven leadership. With advanced reactor technologies emerging, our regulatory approach must keep pace. Significant work remains to develop the regulatory framework Congress envisioned in NEMA, one that is truly risk-informed, reflecting the inherent safety found in advanced designs. It is imperative that the Commission focus its collective effort to meet Congress's intent with a sense of urgency to allow safe nuclear energy deployment on a scale warranted by our national and global clean energy needs. Second, we must strive to improve our performance, not simply measured by safety, but also by the efficient and timely completion of our work. As the old saying goes, you can't manage what you don't measure. If you aren't measuring, you won't know if something is getting better or worse. For over 20 years, we have successfully used performance indicators to objectively measure safety through our reactor oversight process. However, there are few agency performance measures that the Commission or the public see beyond those reported to Congress with our budget, and those are not designed to drive performance improvement. Given the business intelligence tools the agency has available today, I believe we should have meaningful, near real-time measures available to the Commission and the public to track the duration and level of effort for our licensing reviews. Gathering data on these reviews would allow us to benchmark best practices, discover opportunities for process improvements, and refine budget estimates. Measuring the agency's performance would also enable Congress and us at the Commission to hold ourselves accountable for improving. Releasing this information publicly would also reduce perceptions of regulatory risk by providing external stakeholders a window into our progress. I am glad to see Commissioner Barron emphasize timely decision-making by proposing that the Commission establish its expectations for new reactor reviews. While I agree with his intent, I'm unconvinced it will achieve results without a robust set of performance indicators. I am pleased to be working with my colleague, Commissioner Wright, on a proposal for the Commission to do just that. Third, I believe we need results-driven leadership. We must cultivate effective staff leaders who can innovate, implement, and sustain change without falling prey to groupthink. We need our leaders to cultivate a workforce with the best talent and brightest minds and instill a culture of striving for the highest levels of performance. We must also empower our leaders to use their deep knowledge of agency processes to renew our focus on licensing and oversight work. Staff leadership should engage the agency in a back-to-basics effort to risk-inform and streamline internal operations, thereby reducing unnecessary busy work and stress on staff. In 2008 and 2009, the NRC was rated the best place to work at a time when the agency was executing a heavy new reactors workload with challenging schedules and a sense of urgency. I am confident our staff will strive to meet or exceed the goals we set for them. Demonstrating that we can achieve timely reviews and celebrating those successes is vital to improving morale. In conclusion, as the nation's safety and security regulator, we are the gatekeepers to the deployment of advanced reactors. The posture with which we approach our mission will have a distinct impact on whether nuclear energy will make a growing contribution to our energy needs. Congress has made its expectation clear, and the drumbeat from external stakeholders is unmistakable. Our regulatory structure should be clear and straightforward to navigate, and our decision-making should be timely, transparent, and predictable. It is incumbent upon us as an agency to innovate, improve our performance, and cultivate the results-driven leadership capable of bringing it all together to meet these expectations. Going forward, I hope the committee will continue its oversight and monitor our performance and hold us accountable. Thank you for the opportunity to provide my comments, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Caputo, and welcome back. I'll now go and recognize Commissioner Crowell for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Duncan, Ranking Member DeGette, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. As the NRC's newest commissioner, I've had the pleasure of building positive working relationships with my fellow commissioners, and it has been readily apparent that a genuine spirit of collegiality among the commission forms the foundation for successfully overseeing the execution of the NRC's mission with maximum effectiveness and efficiency. Indeed, the benefits of collegiality are most fully realized when operating with the full complement of commissioners. With 5 commissioners since last August, the commission has made progress on pivotal issues related to the existing reactor fleet while forging ahead on establishing a responsible regulatory framework to support the next generation of nuclear technologies. Chair Hanson highlighted many of these topics in his testimony, as well as other notable recent accomplishments by the NRC, while also emphasizing the robust work schedule ahead for fiscal year 24 and beyond. The NRC plays a central role in the future viability of nuclear energy, both in the U.S. and abroad. As our nation's regulator for the safe and secure operation of civilian nuclear technologies, the NRC is committed to fully meeting this responsibility such that the public can have confidence that all NRC licensees operate in a manner that minimizes risk and maximizes safety. The foundational mission of the NRC must always be the uncompromising commitment to public health, safety, and the environment, and to promote the common defense and security. However, as we look to the future, this vital mission must be achieved using a broader lens than has traditionally been used at the NRC. While the function of an independent, commission-led agency such as the NRC is intentionally distinct from traditional federal executive branch agencies, Congress did not intend for independent agencies to operate in a vacuum or be immune from the inherent collective responsibility of all U.S. government agencies to advance the common good. Based on this bedrock principle, I believe the NRC must renew its commitment to safety and security by embracing the shared responsibility of our nation's collective effort to address climate change and energy security within the context of executing the agency's statutorily defined mission. Nuclear energy provides over half of America's carbon-free electricity and avoids more than 470 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions that would otherwise come from fossil fuels. This is just in the United States. Globally, the International Atomic Energy Agency estimates that nuclear energy avoids 2 gigatons per year of carbon emissions. This is roughly equivalent to displacing the energy output and associated pollution of over 500 coal plants. To achieve an equivalent reduction in emissions without nuclear energy would require siting, building, and operating over half a million new wind turbines. Similarly, recent geopolitical events have brought back into clear focus that energy security and national security go hand in hand. Meanwhile, maintaining the current operating fleet of nuclear reactors and deploying new and advanced reactors is one of the very few options to achieve meaningful near-term reductions in carbon pollution while serving as an important baseload power supply. These benefits, combined with the anticipated significantly enhanced safety features of newer and advanced reactors, creates the opportunity for advanced nuclear energy to be truly game-changing technology in the U.S. and beyond. However, while the potential for nuclear energy to make a meaningful and enduring contribution to reducing carbon emissions and stabilizing our energy grid is real, time is of the essence. The NRC plays a critical role in our nation and indeed our world's collective effort to meet this moment. But to be successful, the NRC must embrace a contemporary sense of purpose that embodies the challenges and opportunities before us. Essential to this effort, the NRC must restore, build, and maintain public trust through proactive and meaningful interactions with the public, other governmental organizations, and the full spectrum of stakeholders. Likewise, we must not focus solely on the benefits of nuclear energy in the power sector. The NRC must also maintain a commitment to safely regulating the full fuel cycle by asserting commensurate focus on issues from mining to waste in its regulatory decisions, oversight, and research activities. Proactive engagement on used fuel management, decommissioning, and waste disposal is critical to enhancing public confidence, and failing to do so will have the opposite effect. I'm excited by the challenges of what we can and must accomplish by the end of this decade, but we must get to work now to maintain this level of commitment and maintain this level of commitment in subsequent years to succeed. With adequate resources for the agency and under clear, consistent leadership by the Commission, I believe we can achieve our goals, and I'm confident that the NRC staff is up to the challenge. The FY24 budget request is an important next step to ensure the NRC has the resources necessary to meet this pivotal moment, and I look forward to discussing that with you today and your questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and time is of the essence, exactly. I want to thank everyone for their testimony. We'll now move into the question and answering portion of the hearing, and I'll begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes of questions. Each of you talk about preparing the NRC for the future while maintaining its mission to provide assurance of adequate safety. I appreciate that. I support that and will support you in that mission. However, the NRC seems to have been undergoing efforts to transform itself to meet the future for over a decade. The future's now. I'm wondering how that is going. An important example is license renewals for existing reactors. This work may double over the next decade. Chair Hanson, you and I talked about the staff review of license renewals and subsequent license renewals that take longer and cost more. The reviews doubled in cost and in time from the first reviews in 2000 through 2015 and have trended higher ever since. NRC is charging $6 million per review today versus $2 million in 2000, including for previously reviewed sites. This does not reflect an agency learning, improving, or getting more efficient. Now, we learned that applicants like Oconee, Turkey Point, and North Anna, that their subsequent license renewals will be delayed by months, failing to meet their published deadlines. So how is that a sign of positive transformation or efficient and predictable regulation? Chair Hanson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate the discussion on subsequent license renewals. I agree we should be getting more efficient on these. I don't have all the numbers about the dollars in front of me. Since 2015, when we've really been tracking the specific hours on these, We've had an average of about 21,000 hours. We're a little above that right now on the subsequent ones for 25,000 hours. I've been digging into this. I'm not entirely satisfied with the answers I'm getting, and I'm going to continue to explore this. There are a few more areas we need to look at when we go from 60 to 80 years, but there should be a lot of things that are also the same. And I admit that our review process isn't fully risk-informed, and we need to take a look at that and see how we can achieve some efficiencies there and make sure we're focused on the most safety significant items. So that's an area that I'm focused on with the staff as we speak, and I'm going to continue to do so.
And I appreciate the 60 to 80 years. I know my constituents probably be concerned that we're licensing a nuclear reactor out to 80 years, but I appreciate your efforts there. I will say that. Commissioner Caputo, you make an important point about being an innovative regulator. I'm hopeful we'll see more of that. You also talk about measuring results and you reference Congress's requirements for metrics in the NEMA. Have those metrics been implemented sufficiently to measure performance?
Well, Congress has established expectations, but I have yet to see how we publicly track those with actual metrics. And when I refer to business intelligence software that's accessible to us, I believe it's possible for us to track progress of reviews in what I said in my statement, near real time, to show progress in terms of a percentage of completion, but also to track hours in review. A lot of our reviews are done by chapters. So as discussions unfold and hours that are budgeted for the review are executed, it would be easy to tell in real time where the hours necessary to complete the review, how far along we are in that review, so that people can actually see what progress we're making and where any sticking points might be in terms of actual schedule risk.
In real time for all the commissioners to actually keep track of it.
And the public.
Yeah, good. Well, Chair Hanson, let me come back to you. You and I talked about measuring performance. What are you doing to improve the metrics so that staff leaders can manage better?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're implementing a couple of tools. One is called our Mission Analytics Portal, which we've been kind of piloting inside the agency, where project managers on specific reviews can track hours, and not only track hours, but actually assign hours to resolve particular technical issues. So
These are regulators or industry folks?
I'm sorry?
Are these regulators or industry folks that are working together on that?
Well, we've piloted this largely internally, and then we've got an external version which we're just starting to roll out so that our licensees can then track our progress and know what to expect on our reviews. What we haven't done, I think, yet is then kind of set the benchmarks on that. We're tracking it, but setting those bright lines within that system and fully understanding where we're approaching them or where we're crossing them, I think, is kind of the next step then in the management of that. Yeah. So we're again, I don't think we're fully where we need to be. I think Commissioner Caputo makes a good point about needing to make progress in this area. I fully agree with that, but we've taken some important steps.
Thank you for that. My time's expiring. I will say this, that there's a lot of industry folks in the room, and all of us engage with industry folks, and they need to know certainty, timelines, and they have investors they've got to inform. I like the open portal for the public, so what I'm hearing, I appreciate. I'll now go to the ranking member DeGette for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as all of you know, in April, we had a hearing with leaders from the nuclear industry to talk about the challenges that they're facing in their operations and their planning. And the question I asked, which I referred to in my opening statement, was how the lack of a comprehensive long-term nuclear waste strategy impacts their planning and their industry. So now here we have you all here today. I'd like to ask a similar question, starting with you, Chairman Hanson. In your view, how has the lack of a comprehensive spent fuel strategy impacted the nuclear industry?
Thank you, Ranking Member DeGette, for that question. We are overseeing right now the safety and security of spent fuel at sites around the country. And that spent fuel is being safely stored.
How has it impacted the industry that we don't have a long-term policy?
I think I would say that it's probably increased the costs for the industry, but I think safety, we're able to assure the safety of that spent fuel on site.
Would it be a good idea to get a long-term policy about disposing of spent fuel? Maybe that's a better question.
Undoubtedly.
And-
I think it may be up to our colleagues at the Department of Energy to formulate that strategy, and then we're going to have the role
You'll implement.
well, not implementing it, but assuring the safety of that. So, for instance, in the interim storage facilities, whether that's at reactors or away from reactors, we license those and we evaluate the safety and the environmental impacts of that. And then the overall national strategy of that, the policy of that, really kind of resides in other arms of the executive branch.
Right, thank you. The committee sent a series of letters to nuclear stakeholders soliciting feedback on the licensing process, as several of us have mentioned. And a lot of what we heard was that the process was burdensome and would benefit from streamlining. But as I said in my opening, we can't sacrifice the public health and safety of Americans in the name of speeding up development of nuclear energy. So let me try this question, Mr. Chairman. Do you think that the NRC can make meaningful reforms to streamline the process without sacrificing public health and safety? Yes or no will work.
Absolutely, I do.
What about you, Commissioner Brown? You're shaking your head.
I agree, yes.
Commissioner Wright? Commissioner Caputo?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Crowell?
Yes.
Great. I think it's an important point about not sacrificing public health and safety. And so, Mr. Chairman, not to keep you on the hot seat, but under your leadership, how's the NRC considering safety features of new nuclear technologies while ensuring the same standard of safety evaluations that we've come to expect from the agency in which it's performed?
Yes, ma'am. We have a policy statement that says advanced reactors should achieve at least the same level of safety as the current operating fleet, and that's one of our guiding principles as we explore these new reactors. We've dived into some of the unique aspects of these reactors. I mentioned the 51 technical reports. A lot of those have been about the new technology that's being deployed, et cetera, so that we can get a head start on some of that and evaluate some of that early.
Great, thanks. Now, if we were to reform the licensing process, the amount of work required by the NRC would increase, and Congress would have to provide additional resources to ensure the safety that we've come to expect from the agency. And so, Commissioner Crowell, I was going to ask you, what resources are most needed for the NRC to continue to ensure safety within our nuclear fleet?
Thank you for the question. The NRC is primarily a fee-based agency, so we derive most of our operating money from the licensees. But as that dynamic changes and fees may change over time depending on the amount of applicants we have or the facilities we oversee, I think it's important to be able to do some independent evaluation on safety and security that isn't necessarily tied to the fees of licensees, and so having some appropriated dollars to focus on those areas in, generically and generally, I think would be helpful.
Commissioner Brown, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure, yeah, I would just say that in the last few years, Congress has been very supportive on the advanced reactor side, establishing the framework, right? So there's no one to bill for establishing the overall advanced reactor framework that we've been talking about, Part 53, and several of the key policies around that. That's not a specific licensing review, it's a regulatory framework. And so that's been off the fee base, which is good, and Congress has been very supportive in that area, and that's really helped us build that out without affecting fees.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Julie yields back. I'll now go and recognize Mr. Latta from Ohio for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the commissioners for being with us today. It's good to have you all here again. I'm going to kind of revise some of the questions that I had earlier, but let me start with this. Mr. Chairman, how much uranium do we get from Russia for our reactors in this country?
Yeah, I believe it's about 20 to 30% of our current needs are fulfilled by Russia.
And the second question is, and how much of that's being enriched by the Russians?
I guess I thought that number was enriched. It was enriched
rich
uranium.
than
Yeah.
receiving. Okay. Let me ask this, if I just get a yes or no question, maybe from all the commissioners. Is it a good idea that we're getting this much uranium from the Russians, or should we be getting it from ourselves or from other sources?
I think I can say as a matter of policy, no, it is not a good idea.
I agree, it's not a good idea.
No.
Not at this point, given their recent actions in the last few years.
I agree with the chair's response.
Well, thank you. And I think it's important because a question that we were discussing when the Secretary of Energy was here not too long ago was this. And I was just following up with my friend from Colorado with her line of questions, especially when we're talking about with our spent nuclear rods and where they're being stored. France right now is about the only country in the world, if I'm not mistaken, is the only one that's really recycling their rods. Is that correct?
Correct.
And why isn't the United States not looking at trying to do the same thing? Because it's my understanding, if you can go out and with a spent rod, you might be able to get another usage out of it if you recycle it, which would then reduce our dependence on uranium from foreign sources. And it would also have us take care of the situation as how we're restoring it, because it's been several years ago that several members of this committee have been out to Yucca Mountain, which I've got to say is the most expensive hole I've ever been in, at over, I think it was over $18 billion, not being utilized, that we should be doing something in this country with our spent rods. But what's happening in this country that we're not doing it?
Well, Congressman, I can tell you that our regulations are certainly adequate to ensure the safety of any kind of recycling or reprocessing operation that might come down the pipe. I think in the history, there hasn't been at least in the last 30 or so years, been any prohibition on recycling in the U.S. And so I think it's been a matter of policy on other parts of the government and the economics of that.
Commissioner Caputo?
Congressman, the point that you make regarding domestic supply is very accurate, and that's in fact what drove both France and the UK to develop reprocessing, because estimates in the 70s were that uranium was going to become extremely expensive. But it is a cost-intensive process, and so the economics of reprocessed uranium versus natural uranium is an extreme cost difference. I think the question
May I interrupt
that we will be
on that
looking
question?
at-
Could you, when you say an extreme cost difference, can you tell me any kind of a percentage what we're looking at there?
When I graduated from school and took my first post working with nuclear fuel buyers, the difference was between $9.50 a pound for uranium and roughly $400.
Okay, and since that time, though, has the cost been able to be brought down from that level?
Possibly, but I think one of the potentials for advancement here is with the advanced reactors that we are seeing. They can utilize reprocessed materials, I think, in different ways, just based on the reactor physics of how they operate. So I think there are opportunities perhaps for less cost-intensive separations technologies that could then fuel some of these advanced reactors. So I think there's room for progress in bundling those two technologies.
Are those studies going on right now, or the analysis of being able to bring those costs down to make sure that we could be, because again, what happens if that 20% of the Russian uranium that we're receiving right now all of a sudden dries up? What does that do to the cost of everything else then that would
The difference between the 70s and now is we have a much better understanding of uranium reserves, and they are really prolific. And should the cost really rise, we can actually recover it from seawater, although that, I think, still remains in excess of $200 a pound. So there are opportunities like that. The last time a serious cost estimate was done, I believe, was in 2006, and this was commissioned by Energy and Water Appropriations. But that was looking at a slightly modified version of historic technology. So there's probably room, I think, at this point to perhaps do another cost estimate looking at the advanced reactor technologies and the separations technologies that might facilitate those reactors.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks to the commissioners for being here. Mr. Chairman, my time has expired, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, and I'll now go to the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Pallone, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start with a topic that is relevant to my state and many others with shut-down nuclear plants. NRC's decommissioning rulemaking. Unfortunately, the proposed rule before the Commission fails to properly expand the role of states and local governments in this process, one that has generated impacts on these communities. So with regard to the decommissioning rulemaking, let me ask Chairman Hanson, in 2021, I asked you to commit to taking a serious look at this, and you agreed, stating, and I quote, "I understand the importance of this for local communities. Can you update me on where things stand as it relates to the role of states and local governments in this proposed rule?"
Yeah, thank you, Congressman Pallone. We had an extensive public comment period on the draft rule that and had included a number of questions for the public and got a lot of feedback on that. The staff is currently revising the draft rule, and we expect to have a final rule in front of the Commission, I believe in October or November later this year. Then we'll see what the changes have been and how they've incorporated the public's comments.
Now, let me ask Commissioners Barron and Crowell, do you believe the proposed rule appropriately addresses the role of states and local governments in the decommissioning process? I'll start with Commissioner Barron.
Well, at the stage of the proposed rule, I didn't think it did. I shared your concerns about that. I think we should go further in making sure that states and local governments have a voice in the decommissioning process. I mean, plant shutting down is a big deal for everyone, right? It's a big deal for the company, it's a big deal for the workers, the state, the locality. And right now, the role there's really very limited. And one thing that could be done, and there were a lot of comments we got on the proposed rule in this regard, was to have a decommissioning plan that's approved by NRC. I'd like to see that before it's approved by NRC, go to the state as well for their feedback and have that baked in before NRC even takes a look at it. But I think there is more than we can do, and I would like to see us do more on that rule to empower local communities more than they are now.
Thank you. Commissioner Crowell?
I would generally agree with those sentiments. I think whether within the proposed rule or through other mechanisms, there's room for improvement for engaging local communities on decommissioning. I think we could do a lot outside of the rule just through good stakeholder engagement to help communities feel like their interests are being protected in the decommissioning process. We could do those mechanisms formally through a rule, but there's no reason why we can't do them in an informal fashion as well to make sure that the communities are getting what they need.
Thank you. I mentioned in my opening statement, in 2021, the NRC created an environmental justice review team to review how the agency's programs, policies, and activities addressed environmental justice. The resulting assessment made 6 formal recommendations, and yesterday at a subcommittee hearing with FERC commissioners, I discussed the newly established FERC Office of Public Participation, something I've advocated for a long time, and this office will assist the public with participating in often complex FERC proceedings. So let me ask Chairman Hanson, the FERC Office of Public Participation model seems like it would provide similar benefits if implemented at the NRC. Both commissions regulate complex topics that are often difficult for regular citizens to understand and participate in. Would you consider standing up an Office of Public Participation at the NRC as part of the ongoing environmental justice review?
Thank you, Congressman Pallone. Yeah, the paper that we got back on environmental justice from the staff kind of really centered around 2 main things. One was about updating our strategy and policy, which are 20 or 30 years old. The other part was really enhancing public engagement on that. And so the paper is still before the commission for consideration, but should the opportunity arise and one of my colleagues votes to establish such an office, I personally would welcome that.
All right. I don't know if there's only 45 seconds left, but Commissioners Barron or Crowell, do you have any comments on this idea? 30 seconds.
I think it's a very good idea. I think it's important for NRC to establish a similar office. Other federal agencies like FERC have done that, and we got that comment over and over and over in our environmental justice review comment period. I mean, just tons of stakeholders were saying it's very difficult to navigate NRC's processes and procedures, and on top of a lot of technical information, and having an office that could help folks navigate all that, I think would be really valuable.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time expired. Now recognize gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. As you all may be able to read from the plaque, I'm from Virginia. I represent the southwest portion of Virginia. And I'm excited about Governor Youngkin's energy plans, overall energy plans, and his aspirations to make the Commonwealth of Virginia a leader in nuclear power renaissance. We're looking at the viability of small modular reactors in my district, particularly the possibility of using an abandoned mine site, particularly a surface mine, or a brownfield site. Now, I would ask all of you for early site permit timelines, what would be your goal for application review time, including pre-application meetings, and particularly for small modular reactors? Chairman Hanson, and then we'll just go down the road.
Okay, thank you. I believe the early site permit would include an environmental impact statement in there, and I think the new debt ceiling bill includes some specific timelines in there for the completion of EISs. I believe that's 24 months, so we would expect to meet that schedule.
All right. Any difference of opinion?
No, not at all. And the proposal we were talking about earlier that I had presented to my colleagues just last week, I think one of the things we should be doing is looking at what are the aggressive but achievable schedules we should be thinking about for different types of applications like early site permits.
I absolutely think, Representative, that we can do better than 24 months. And that would be, I mean, efficiency is something that is needed right now in order to meet this moment. And I think we are the ones that have to kind of model that.
Yes, ma'am.
I agree with that, but I also think that the commission and the agency have been fairly quiet about these timeframes and in the need to meet them and have a sense of urgency. And so I think there's room for us to sort of step up the message and create an expectation for staff that we are serious about meeting these goals.
And I'll just agree with most of what my colleagues have said and just add that if an applicant chooses to pursue an early site permit, that should help facilitate the license review and approval process, not just add time to it. So we need to make sure that that's being taken into account as we review early site permits.
Yeah, and I am excited about it possibly coming into our region. The district is a energy region historically. We're also, the district is fairly large, so it does stretch out a little bit, but we're only a few miles from BWX in Lynchburg. We're maybe 30, 40 miles from BWX in Irwin, Tennessee, and the district also is only about 75 miles from Oak Ridge. So we've got all the right components close by that I think we need to make sure that we have a safe opportunity, and we're excited about those prospects. Commissioner Caputo, I understand that the NRC holds a so-called mandatory hearing for several license types. These hearings can be duplicative. By the time you all get around to the hearing, the license has been subject to an extensive NRC staff review, advisory committee on reactor safeguard reviews, and public challenges and public comments. Could you talk some about the streamlining of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's licensing hearings?
Well, these hearings are currently mandated in the Atomic Energy Act, but they are separate from adjudications and adjudicatory processes that result from contentions that get filed. So these are the practices to conduct these at the commission level. So I think there would be a fair amount of streamlining that would occur in terms of reducing the time to prepare and actually hold these hearings. The commission is hopefully in the fall going to hold a mandatory hearing for essentially a research and test reactor. But the months leading up to it are filled with preparation, and it's a full day of the commission with numerous witnesses, and I think probably in excess of 30 staff members committing their time. If the commission were to find itself reviewing a significant number of applications, it would be pretty time intensive, both for the commission staff to prepare for these hearings and for the commissioners to put a lot of these on the calendar in addition to its regular duties. So I think there's room for a reform there to give the commission discretion over situations where they might believe a mandatory hearing would be warranted versus opportunities to streamline the calendar by not conducting them.
All right, will you help us if we need to draft legislation to help y'all do that?
Happy to.
Thank you, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now go to California. Mr. Peters, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the witnesses for being here. I want to start by congratulating you on what's really a remarkable safety record in this industry. I did a little looking and was really surprised at how really safe nuclear power is in relation to other industries. If you want a fun listen, I recommend the Freakonomics podcast about this, which you're all smiling, you've all heard. But congratulations and thank you for your work on that score. I do want to say also thank you for the continued interest in fusion and work on that. That's clearly a long bet that's worth making, and I continue to support the country's investment in that. But I'm also interested, as my colleagues know, in making our climate goals. What I read is it's very difficult to imagine how we do that without really relying on nuclear, and nuclear is really a safe bet in terms of how to get there. So I thank you for your work and look forward to working with you in the next generation of nuclear power. And I want to talk to you, Mr. Chairman, about my concerns about the time it takes to get permitted. NuScale Power is so far the only company to achieve an NRC license for their small modular reactor design. They chose to use the Part 52 licensing pathway, pursue a design certification, which could help ease future licensing reviews for their design. NuScale has publicly stated they have spent over $500 million on application activities, 2 million labor hours obtaining their design certification. And according to the generic milestone schedule, a combined license under Part 52 could take anywhere from 30 to 42 months to reach a final safety evaluation. And this is not entirely unknown. This is a schedule we really want to compress. So as you work to develop the new Part 53 pathway, one that will be specifically designed for advanced reactor licensing, can you explain how the NRC intends to create a framework that will lead to a more efficient and less costly licensing and permitting process, still guaranteeing safety? What's our goal here? What are we trying to get to?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. It's a great question. If I could, I'll make a couple of remarks about NuScale and then kind of what we learned and how I think we're applying that then to the Part 53 process. We learned a lot through that NuScale design. It took 41 months. I'm not sure how much money NuScale spent. They paid us about $67 million over that period of time to conduct that review. But the Part 52 process was also a process where they needed to have basically a complete design. And then that design is codified in regulation that anybody can use to deploy anywhere. And so the idea being that the additional review would just be site-specific type things, emergency planning, external hazards, that kind of thing. So you make an upfront investment then to achieve efficiencies on the back end.
Right.
For Part 53, what we're really trying to do is make it much more technology inclusive. The regulations that we have now in Part 52, as you noted, Part 50, are very specific to light water reactors. And so the folks who are pursuing maybe advanced reactor applications under that have to go then and do a detailed analysis. We have to do a detailed analysis about which parts really apply. Well, if we take a lot of that, maintain the safety standards, but take a lot of that light water reactor specificity out of the regulation, then that provides, I think, an enormous potential to streamline the process. I can tell you that even under Part 52, our goal is to get down to 24 months for a design certification.
Thank you for
approval.
Appreciate that. Is it Caputo, Commissioner? Is that how you say it? I would just like to point out on reprocessing. So I've got north of me, I've got the San Onofre. I represent San Diego. North of me is the San Onofre shuttered facility now with a bunch of spent fuel sitting there, near population centers, near faults, near a military base. I'm counting on you to keep that safe. I believe you when you tell me that you will keep it safe. but it does seem like a waste in another way. And I understand that the added cost of reprocessing that you explained, but when we're thinking about the costs that we're talking about spending in terms of a permanent disposal, I think we ought to factor those in as sort of opportunity costs when we think about reprocessing. So I just favor us looking aggressively at reusing that fuel in a way that generates power, and to the extent that that requires federal effort. And I'd love to have you answer that, but I'm out of time, so someone else has got to ask the question, or you can sneak it in on somebody. Thank you. I yield back.
Happy to take it for the record.
I thank the gentleman for yielding back. I'll now go to Mr. Wahlberg for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the Commission for being here. We all have plenty of questions we'd love you to answer even further, so thanks for taking the ones we do have. My district is home to 2 nuclear plants, Cook on Lake Michigan and Fermi on Lake Erie, both sides of the state. I'm encouraged by the future of nuclear, but I also am concerned about some things that I read. NEI recently conducted a survey that found that over half of nuclear utilities are exploring power upgrades. But the problem is the NRC's review process has gotten longer and longer and longer, and consequentially more and more expensive. For example, Palisades Nuclear Plant is located just a few miles north of my district on Lake Michigan. While it's currently being decommissioned, there are serious efforts to bring the plant back online, including through the Civil Nuclear Credit Program established by Congress. So, Chairman Hanson, there are a few hurdles the plant must clear before reaching the Commission, but if it does, how can we ensure an expeditious approval process to bring it back online?
Thank you, Congressman Wahlberg. I grew up right near Palisades. Actually, my family lives near Cook, and worked at the state park there right next to the plant during college. And
Warren Dunes, yeah.
know that site well, and have taken a keen interest in it too, obviously. We are in active discussions with Holtec, the current owner of that site, about how to, they've gotten a series of exemptions when they shut down, basically how to undo those exemptions in a timely way, how they're going to physically bring the plant back into compliance, and how they're going to reestablish the programs. It's new ground for both Holtec and, I admit, for us, but I'm confident that the staff can approach this with the appropriate sense of urgency and creativity while maintaining safety too, if Holtec decides to proceed through that and the economics work for them and so on and so forth, that we can work with them productively to get that plan up and running.
Well, that's encouraging to hear. The only discouragement that I potentially feel comes from concerns about Diablo and what went on there in California. In that situation, as far as I know, the operator asked the NRC commissioners and staff to resume review of the previous licensing application, which had been 80% complete. And I know that's a bit different than what Palisades would have, but I think the principles are still there. It's my understanding that staff, not the commission, rejected the request. This was a new and novel matter that would appear to fit the definition of a policy matter requiring commission input, not as staff matter. But the staff does not appear to have consulted the commission, and so when you say that you're confident the staff in working with Palisades, that gives me a little bit of concern. Choices like these could cost taxpayers tens of millions of dollars more than necessary. Could you encourage me a bit more, Mr. Chairman, and I offer to the commission as well to respond, on the commission's role in Palisades and other similar entities in the future?
Thank you, Congressman. I was out at Diablo just a couple of weeks ago, and I engaged in this conversation with the licensee because we didn't grant the request, essentially, the staff didn't grant the request to just restart. My question for them was, how are interactions going with the staff? The idea here is that the licensee shouldn't have to start from zero, that a lot of the information in that previous application ought to be usable kind of going forward, and how are those interactions going? I wanted to hear directly from the licensee. And the feedback, at least I got from Pacific Gas and Electric, was that they were going well, that there weren't big areas that they were going to have to do, that they could rely on previous decisions that the NRC made in this new submittal, et cetera. So that's part of why I'm feeling reasonably encouraged. I'm not Pollyannish. I don't want the staff to, and we shouldn't regulate to, 8 decimal places when 1 or 0 will do for reasonable assurance of adequate protection. So.
Well, the regulated, of course, in responding to you, doesn't want any more upheaval,
Right.
and may temper what they say. But I guess I'm asking more about future, how involved, and I guess I could, Mr. Wright, give me your thoughts on that, so I feel more confident that the commission will make sense of what should go forward, regardless of the good staff.
Right.
What will you guys do?
Right, so quickly on 2 issues. One, you're talking about Diablo. I think we missed a huge opportunity right there to be transformative, innovative, doing something new and novel, because it could happen that way. It could have happened, right? And we would have probably given the licensee a little bit more time, I guess, and to get things done, but we've kind of put them up against it a little bit. So things have got to go right, going forward. And I know they're engaged, and I think that staff's on top of that, and I am following that, not just with staff, but also with the licensee. And with Palisades, I think that approach has been different from the start. Holtec is, I've talked with them, I've talked with staff as well. The engagement process there was very early, and it's been going on. They've been very transparent with each other, and everybody now, I get the sense that everybody knows what's required, who's got to do what, and by what time they got to get it done. So I feel better about that.
Well, my time has expired, but I think warp speed ideas need to take place. We know what we're doing. We continue upgrades, but let's get her done. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and I'll go to Ms. Matsui for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I want to welcome all the commissioners here today. It's great to see you all. While many of my colleagues are focused on the future of nuclear power, my district encompassing the Sacramento region continues to grapple with the past. The Rancho Seco nuclear power plant in my district closed over 30 years ago, but the site is still acting as a temporary storage site for spent nuclear fuel. More than 88,000 tons of spent nuclear fuel are currently stranded at current and former reactor sites around the country. This material is a burden on local utilities like the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, and it prevents long-closed nuclear plants from being redeveloped and used for other purposes. I support nuclear energy as an important source of zero-carbon energy, but we must address the waste question. I believe the first step is to build a consolidated interim storage site. According to a 2021 GAO report on spent nuclear fuel, nearly all of the experts interviewed cited the advantages of consolidated interim storage, including cost savings. Now, advanced nuclear reactor designs and small modular reactors have many potential advantages over the current nuclear fleet. However, new nuclear plants will continue to produce hazardous waste. Chair Hanson, can you briefly explain how spent fuel and other radioactive waste produced by these new reactors will differ from the current generation of reactors?
Thank you, Congresswoman Matsui. It's really going to depend on the technology. So in some cases, we are talking about smaller light water reactors, in which case the fuel is going to be very similar to what we've seen so far. In other cases, there are some new ceramic fuel fabrications. Think of ping pong ball sized or billiard ball sized elements of nuclear fuel that will require different storage configurations or security configurations as well. In many cases, we're talking about high assay, low enriched uranium, and so we're talking about longer burn-up times, and so there may be some additional heat time that will potentially change the storage requirements.
Okay, but we still have the waste question here, and especially if we're going to start building new nuclear power plants. And the status quo can't continue indefinitely. The NRC has reviewed at least 4 consolidated storage sites over the last 30 years, and we are not any closer to actually building a consolidated storage facility. This is due in large part to the failure of Congress to pursue a consent-based siting process for consolidated storage facilities. Whether it's a federal or private sector use, community support will be essential to successfully building a consolidated storage site. That's why I'm glad to see the Biden administration's efforts to develop a consent-based approach to siting consolidated spent fuel storage. I've secured funding for these efforts in each of the last 3 years and look forward to working to secure funding for this crucial program in FY24. Chair Hanson, my understanding is that there is currently no requirement for storage license applicants to have community support. But according to the standard review plan for dry storage facilities, applicants must demonstrate financial feasibility. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. They must demonstrate the
Okay.
financial capability.
So applicants need to demonstrate this financial feasibility because otherwise reviewing the application would be a waste of staff time. Similarly, community support is clearly a very important element in determining feasibility, is it not?
We are focused fully on the safety aspects, and the financial capability is how that pertains to the safety of the facility.
Okay, so community support is actually a very important element, right?
It's important, but it's not an area in which we're directly involved.
Okay, I want to make clear that I support the NRC's authority to license private sector storage sites. These sites are safe and cost-effective, but regardless of whether it's federal or private sector sites, we must pursue a consent-based siting process for spent fuel storage, and I believe it's time for Congress to authorize a consent-based siting process. Now, the NRC is also responsible for regulating the transport of nuclear fuels, nuclear materials, and waste. One of the concerns that is commonly raised regarding the development of a consolidated storage site is that the transport of radioactive material poses new safety risks. Chair Hanson, to what degree is spent nuclear fuel already transported around the country?
Yeah, so spent nuclear fuel is already transported around the country by the Department of Energy, by the Navy, et cetera, has been safely for decades. We recently undertook a readiness review for the commercial, the transport of commercial spent fuel, and we believe our regulations and policies and procedures are adequate to ensure the safety of those operations.
You're confident that we can safely transport spent fuel and other radioactive waste
Yes, ma'am.
from reactor sites to this consolidated storage facility?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
Generally yields back. I'll now go to the chair of the Environmental Subcommittee, Mr. Johnson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to you folks, the NRC commissioners, for being with us today. This is an important hearing, and this is going to inform us. And I know I and others on this committee want to legislate in this space. So I'm looking forward to getting some of your thoughts today as we go through this hearing. I'm planning on reintroducing my Strengthening American Nuclear Competitiveness Act in the coming weeks, and the legislation will require the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, you folks, to present several reports to Congress. So first, I want to go to Commissioner Caputo. You mentioned in your testimony that you want the NRC to innovate how it accomplishes its mission. My legislation would ask the NRC to issue a report on innovative non-electric uses of advanced nuclear technology or small modular reactors and perhaps in energy-intensive manufacturing and other applications. Do you believe NRC is equipped to study these technologies for future licensing, and do you support the NRC having a role here?
I believe it's very appropriate for us to study the nature of how process heat, as it's generated in the plant, would ultimately be used within the bounds of how it impacts safety.
But are you equipped to do that studying, do you think?
For the safety review, yes, indeed.
Okay, all right. What about you, Chairman Hanson?
Yes, I believe we're well-equipped to evaluate the non-power applications of nuclear power and the safety on that.
Okay, all right. Well, next I want to touch on another part of my legislation. I think we all can agree here today that we're not interested in inhibiting investment in nuclear technology here at home. We want and need to strengthen the fleet. My bill would lift the Atomic Energy Act's outdated ban on foreign investment and control from entities in allied friendly nations. This has at times proven to be a barrier to further nuclear development here in the United States. So, Chairman Hanson, do you and the NRC have a position on this?
The commission hasn't yet taken a position on this. I can tell you I have very close relationships with the regulators in a lot of the friendly countries that you identify in your bill, Congressman, and I think there's a real opportunity there to work more closely together.
Do you think it's appropriate to continue this ban? Do you have an opinion on that, or should we consider changes?
The commission hasn't really taken a position on this, as you know, but I can tell you certainly that since the invasion of Ukraine, I have my interactions with my friendly, like-minded countries on all aspects of the nuclear fuel cycle have increased significantly about how we can cooperatively work together, reduce international regulatory barriers, et cetera, to integration of the global nuclear supply chain along the lines that you propose.
Okay, all right. Next, I want to pivot to keeping our American innovators competitive overseas. You mentioned the war in Ukraine. You know, we've seen an increased interest overseas in the security and reliability of nuclear energy. Ideally, these new reactors are U.S. designs. I'm encouraged by recent announcements in Poland and Romania. Importantly, the designs that these countries are interested in building are either licensed and operating or certified by the NRC. We're talking about Westinghouse AP1000 or NuScale. Chairman Hanson, how can the NRC help other regulators understand U.S. technologies and licensing decisions to spur global deployments?
Yeah, thank you. We are doing this literally as we speak, Congressman. We've had a 10-year relationship with our Polish regulatory counterparts. We've ramped up those interactions in the last 2 or 3 years. I know there were a lot of factors that went into the decision to pick U.S. technology in Poland, but I think the commitment on the part of the NRC to walk alongside and to help prepare that Polish regulator was certainly a factor. I think Commissioner Wright's visit to Romania last year helped cement that relationship as well. Our work with the Canadians on the GE, Hitachi, BWRX, and the joint review we're performing there. And also the GE is looking at exporting that to Poland and other parts around the world also. I can tell you, we've established now a civil nuclear cooperation agreement with Ghana, and I'm headed there to work with their regulator here in just a few weeks.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. We'll now go to the Granite State. Mr. Tonko for 5 minutes.
Empire State, sir.
Somebody mentioned granite to me the other day and that was just in my mind. My apologies to the state of New York, Mr. Tonko.
Okay, New York appreciates you. Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Chair Hanson and the commissioners. I appreciate you being here this morning. Let me do a special shout out to Commissioner Barron. Welcome back to the committee. I have immense respect for the Navy's role in helping to develop the workforce that our civilian nuclear industry relies upon. Many of those sailors are trained on reactors in my district, but I believe our nation's engineering schools also have an important role to play. RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy in the 20th Congressional District, is one such university. RPI and its students have been the beneficiaries of grants under the Commission's University Nuclear Leadership Program. So Chair Hanson, can you discuss this program and its role in supporting nuclear engineering programs at our nation's research universities?
Thank you, Congressman. I think I'm an enthusiastic supporter of the University Nuclear Leadership Program. We've supported over 2,900 students since 2014. almost 50% of those students have then gone on to pursue and obtain nuclear-related employment. Where another 25% are still working on their PhDs or their master's degrees. Part of that is our research grants that kind of support graduate students and professorships and so forth. And some of them are just direct fellowships and scholarships to students that then establish that relationship with the NRC. I've visited probably half a dozen universities so far in my tenure. I try and include those when I go and visit plants and encourage students both in the nuclear field but also in public service. And I think we're seeing some results there.
That's great. And Mr. Chair, I noticed this program was zeroed out in the President's budget request. Can you shed any light on that decision and what you expect the future might look like for the program?
Yeah, we usually have about a year of funding kind of ahead of where we are in any given year. Historically, in order to meet the budget targets that we're given, we have not requested funding. Congress will then give us that funding in advance, and we're happy to receive it and happy to move forward in implementing that program.
Okay, I believe every commissioner recognizes nuclear energy's role in addressing climate change. But we know these reactors exist in environments that are increasingly stressed by the impacts of climate change, including increasing numbers of extreme weather events and severe droughts. Mr. Chair, how is the Commission working to ensure that the existing fleet is more resilient to the impacts of climate change?
Yeah, thank you. We have within the NRC, we have a program on the assessment of natural hazards information that basically is an ongoing evaluation of information surrounding the entire fleet about the environment, about the impacts of climate, changing climate, wildfires, et cetera, and the resilience. I would say that our plants, as we see, I think every year in hurricane season in this country, and due to both operator, cautious operator action as well as NRC oversight, have been incredibly resilient to weather-related impacts.
Do any other commissioners choose to weigh in on that whole concept, or are reactors adequately updating their operations and response plans to reflect climate change concerns?
Yeah, I would just add, one of the steps we took post Fukushima was this program that the chair talked about. There was a time when NRC was much more reactive. There would be new studies out there, whether it be on earthquakes or flooding or climate-related changes. And unless someone kind of brought that to us, the staff wasn't necessarily conducting those kinds of reviews. Now we have something that's much more proactive. We're going out there, the staff is making sure they're up on the latest science in these areas, they're attending academic conferences, they're talking to the federal agencies with responsibilities, so that we are keeping a much closer eye on that, I think, than historically the agency has.
Right. Thank you. And as Congress debates and continues to debate permitting reform, it has become even more clear that successful energy projects must be built based on early and robust community engagement. So, Mr. Chair, what do you see as the role for engagement with communities that host reactors, and how does the Commission help to ensure license holders are good partners with their hosts?
Thank you. For all of our the reactor applications as well as the pre-application engagement activities, the vast majority of those meetings are held in public. They're available for folks to watch online. Then when we actually get into the application stage and we need to perform the environmental review, we'll hold numerous public meetings, opportunities for the public to come and understand the technology, how we're approaching that review, and also then how we're approaching the environmental assessment for that. I know we can always do better in terms of explaining our processes, how we're reaching our decisions, et cetera, but we've got the basic, I think, the bones, I think, are good on the processes that we have.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Empire State yields back, and I'll now go to the Crossroads of America, Mr. Bouchon, for 5 minutes.
You got that right. It is the Crossroads of America, Indiana. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the commissioners for being here. And recently, the state of Indiana shared its intent to join the NRC's Agreement State Program. This program empowers individual states to assume NRC regulatory authority for specific categories of nuclear materials, relinquishing some of the regulatory load off of the NRC. So maybe I'll start Mr. Crowell here, Commissioner Crowell. Could you discuss the benefits of this program for both the NRC and for the agreement states?
Thank you for the question. So I think the more states that become agreement states, the more robust that agreement state program overall becomes, and the burden somewhat lessens on the NRC from having to do that directly. We can do it through oversight, and it should lower costs over time as well. I also think the benefit of the agreement state program is that it helps create an understanding and familiarity with various aspects of nuclear power in those states, and that can help with broader public engagement and support.
Hey, can you maybe briefly discuss the timeline and process for a state like Indiana to join the program?
I'd actually defer to the chair on that.
All right, Chairman Hanson.
Sure, Congressman, I'd be happy to. Typically, it's about a 4-year process.
Okay.
We work closely with them. There's a lot of training, a lot of back and forth. We really walk alongside the state to get them ready to take over that responsibility.
Great, and anyone can add, do you think that the agreement state program plays a role in supporting public engagement efforts that foster public support for the safe and responsible deployment of nuclear technologies?
I certainly do. I agree with Commissioner Kroll. Having folks, government often works best at the level closest to the populace, and I think this is a good example of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, we need that. It's very important, right, for all the work that all of us are trying to do here, to have public sentiment behind us as members of Congress. Of course, that's the most critical piece of this equation. Yes, Commissioner Wright.
Congressman, I'm a big fan of the agreement state program, and I have been in the presence of the people from Indiana at some of the meetings at Organization of Agreement States. We are willing to engage, so if we need to come and meet with somebody, we're willing to do that, and I would commit that I would go myself if you need me to. So.
Sure. Thank you very much. The Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act directs the Commission to develop a risk-informed, technology-neutral framework for advanced reactors. And I had another hearing in health, so I may have missed some of this, but we've already heard some comments on that, of course. But NRC is supposed to provide reasonable assurance of adequate safety of nuclear reactors. Commissioner Caputo, can you speak to what risk-informed means and how that works in the context of reasonable assurance of adequate safety standard?
Risk-informing fundamentally means using risk insights together with other considerations to focus safety reviews on the items that are the most significant to safety. So it's an attempt to sort of narrow what our focus is to the areas where safety regulation creates the biggest safety benefits. So by narrowing that, it's a hope of limiting the regulatory burden to where things are truly safety significant.
Yep. I also want to say I was recently in Poland also with the chairwoman, and we were talking about this issue, and we do have competition. They're talking with the French, as you know. So it's very important for the United States and North America to make sure that we don't have processes in place that limit our ability to effectively compete. And part of that is cost, part of that is time, part of that is safety, other issues. So I wanted to say that. And then in closing, the NRC doesn't regulate nuclear submarines. Is that correct?
That's correct, Congressman.
So I do find it, and somebody mentioned this to me the other day, that if you've ever been on a nuclear submarine, which I have, the USS Kentucky, when it refueled and went out into the Pacific Ocean, it struck me that the person that dove the boat under the water was about 22 years old. And the entire ship, including the commanding officer I think was about 33. So we have this big nuclear reactor in a nuclear submarine in the middle of the ocean, and we have very strong young people that are in charge. And so I just say that because I think we need to put that in context of the overall situation that we're in here, and that this can be done. I know it's different, but it can be done if there are strong programs in place, and we don't need all these barriers all the time. Yeah, Chairman. Briefly.
We're great beneficiaries of our nuclear Navy program. About 25% of our workers are military veterans, and the vast majority of them from the Navy. And so that kind of experience and that kind of a strong experience, including our Executive Director of Operations here behind me, Dan Dorman, in operating and working on nuclear submarines.
I yield back, Chairman.
Not a single mishap in the United States Navy with regard to nuclear. So I now go to the Granite State, for real. Ms. Custer's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Duncan and Ranking Member DeGette, for holding this important hearing. And I want to thank all 5 NRC commissioners for taking the time to join us. There are 54 nuclear power plants in the United States, and these power plants provide, as you've heard today, nearly 20% of the electricity generated and 50% of the non-carbon electricity. The nuclear power generated in the United States displaces the equivalent of roughly 500 coal plants, but unlike coal or natural gas, nuclear energy is carbon-free. Given the significant role nuclear energy plays in our energy system and our energy future, the footprint of nuclear power plants across the nation, most Americans would be reassured to learn about the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or NRC. The NRC exists for one purpose: to ensure nuclear power plants in the United States operate safely. And I want to underscore that this is an incredibly important responsibility. Chairman Hanson, the NRC currently has a full contingent of 5 commissioners. Can you explain how a full contingent of 5 commissioners helps the NRC function properly?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I think fundamentally having 5 people with differing views, but who have very professional and collegial relationships actually results in stronger decision-making and policy-making on the part of the agency. It really, because of, I think as the chairman mentioned, the urgency of the issues in front of us, we are able to kind of divide and conquer on a number of things, whether it's Commissioner Caputo focusing on effective performance measures, or Commissioner Barron on policy statements, or other things that I have the opportunity to lead on. I think given the amount of work in front of us, it's more important than ever that we have a full complement of commissioners.
Well, thank you. And I might note, Commissioner Barron's term expires at the end of the month, and his renomination is currently pending before the Senate. I am very supportive of Commissioner Barron, and I hope that the Senate acts quickly to confirm him. I want to zero in on the impact of nuclear energy in my state, New Hampshire, the Granite State. Nuclear energy is the largest power generation source in New Hampshire. All the nuclear electricity generated in New Hampshire comes from the Seabrook Nuclear Power Station. And while Seabrook is a key piece of infrastructure in my state, it also faces some significant challenges. There's an ongoing alkali silica reaction, ASR, at Seabrook that is slowly causing cracking throughout the facility. Monitoring the ongoing ASR is critical to ensuring the integrity and the safety of Seabrook, and my constituents, my colleague Chris Pappas, and our colleagues in Maine, Jared Golden and Shelley Pingree. Thankfully, the NRC has 2 resident inspectors at Seabrook whose full-time job is to walk the plant and ensure its operating safety. The 2 resident inspectors, Chris Newport and Travis Dawn, are unsung heroes, and I want to acknowledge how important their work is for keeping the public safe. They literally have spent thousands of hours per year inspecting the plant and ensuring that it is safe. Chairman Hanson and Commissioner Barron, both of you have visited Seabrook. Can you briefly describe the role that Chris and Travis play and the benefits of having NRC personnel on site at our nuclear power plants around the country?
Thank you, Congresswoman. Well, hopefully after this hearing, they're not completely unsung. I think very highly of both Chris and Travis, as well as the rest of our resident inspectors who walk around these plants every day. And with regard to the alkali silica reaction, that's actually a phenomenon that NRC staff discovered at Seabrook, and we've been keeping track of that ever since and bringing the expertise of the agency and working with the licensee to bear on that. And I make it a point, and I know my colleagues do too, to meet and spend some quality time with our resident inspectors when we go visit plants, understand both in more depth the situation at that plant, but also how our program is working for them. It involves maybe more moves for them around the country because of the rotations that we require. Often in kind of far-flung places. Seabrook isn't particularly far-flung.
Happens to be beautiful, the seacoast of New Hampshire.
And it is beautiful. But we do have plants in some far-flung places that can make that more difficult. So I don't know, Commissioner Barron, if you want to add anything.
Well, thanks. I agree. I think our resident inspectors at Seabrook are terrific, and they're closely tracking the alkali silica reaction issues, but all the more traditional safety and security issues as well. I think one of the things that's so great about that team is they're focused on being transparent about sharing their findings with the community so that folks understand what's going on and what NRC is doing there. And when I visited, and in the run-up to that visit to Seabrook, I talked to C10, one of the community organizations that's very engaged, and I heard from them that our residents are really building trust and confidence. And that's really good to hear. And in some ways, I think that team at Seabrook is really the model for what that relationship should look like between.
I hate to cut you off.
Yes.
My time is up, but thank you. We'll leave it at there, the model. Thank
Thanks.
you very much, and I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady, and I'll now go to the Vice Chair of the Subcommittee on Energy, Mr. Curtis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was hoping you would call Utah out as the crossroads of the West. You are. Listen, I'm really delighted to be here, and I've stayed here through this whole hearing. I think this is incredibly important. I'm not sure in recent time that we've had any more 5 important people in front of us for the future of our energy security and our climate and energy goals here in the United States and around the world. I want to begin by giving a shout out to a couple of Utah projects. The Pacificor project is very exciting, although that will ultimately be in Wyoming. I'm hoping their additional plans will expand in Utah, and I'm just really pleased to see the progress that they're making. Also, a shout out to Utah Municipal Power Authority, UAMPS. And you well know the amount of time and the work that they've put into that small nuclear reactor. I think that as I look at 2050, I see our energy sources being affordable, reliable, and clean. And nuclear, hits it out of the park on reliability and on clean. But currently, affordable is problematic, and a lot of that has to do, of course, with the delay in time period and uncertainty in licensing. And we've talked a lot today with my colleagues about speed, and I've heard a lot of positive things from you about speed and innovation. But I want to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page, because I'm thinking we're not talking about doubling speed. We're not talking about tripling speed. I'm thinking we're talking about, between now and 2050, hundreds of nuclear facilities here in the United States, maybe thousands of nuclear facilities here in the United States. And I just want to get your reaction. Are there behind closed door conversations of like, no, this isn't a little bit faster, this is not necessarily even faster. This is figuring out how to permit hundreds and thousands of these facilities in the next couple of decades. Mr. Hanson, sure.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. It's a great question, and it's a completely fair question. The key to a lot of this, I think, is going to be the standardization of the design. And I think for us then, if we have a standardized design that's getting cranked out of a factory, we can go to that factory and say, yep, quality assurance is what it needs to be. Then all we're really doing is looking at site-specific requirements. And I think that, external hazards and
Sure.
some emergency planning and that kind of thing, I think that review can be, my thought, again, I haven't consulted my colleagues, I think it can be less than a year when we get those standardized designs that are getting pushed out.
I'm really
on a
pleased to
regular
hear
basis.
that, and I think that's a good message for the industry as well. And yet at the same time, the industry is in this interesting place where SMRs were getting standardized, but like the Pacificor project, there are also a lot of other tentacles trying out new things, which we want to encourage as well. Let me pivot just to a minute to the concept of investor confidence. I know it's not your job to promote technology, but many in the industry, investors are watching what's happening. What would you say, Mr. Hanson, as the chair? I know you would all do so well, but you're the chair for the group. What would you say to industry about how we can give them the confidence they need to make the investments that they're going to need to this and not be scared about the process.
Yeah, certainly. I agree that there's a need to kind of demystify the regulatory process here, in part for the regulatory community. And I've had some conversations where I've volunteered to do that where necessary. But I think we can point to some things in terms of what we've done. That is the lessons we've learned from previous reviews, and whether that's Vogtle or NuScale, but also then, you know, what we did on Kairos, that advanced reactor technology, and also then the Commission's efforts to really roll up its sleeves and focus in on this advanced reactor rulemaking to make sure that that's predictable, efficient, et cetera, while upholding our safety standards.
Sure. I'm a little concerned, too, that if we don't have the type of domestic program that we want to have, we won't have the influence internationally that we would like to have with international standards and safety standards. Can you speak to what you're doing and what the Commission is doing to make sure we have influence overseas?
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, we're heavily engaged at the IAEA to make sure that our interests are advanced and protected in that international multilateral forum, but then also engaging, you know, with our bilateral partners, whether that's in Poland or Romania, the Czech Republic, I've had numerous discussions with, and they're a very close ally. But also then even some folks that we're competing with in terms of the French, that we make sure that the standards are high, but that, we're approaching it with the right kind of flexibility.
And I'm fortunate out of time. I'd like to just thank you and all 5 of you for being here today, and for the chair and the ranking member for this very, very important conversation.
I appreciate it, gentlemen. Now go to Ms. Schreier for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses for being here today. I would say thank you to Mr. Curtis as well. I thought that question line was really excellent. In my home state of Washington, we have adopted a very ambitious goal to completely eliminate carbon emissions from our energy portfolio by 2045, which means we need to construct new emissions-free capacity resources like advanced nuclear with haste. And this is in addition to wind and solar and the abundant hydropower that we enjoy now as base load. And by expanding our nuclear portfolio, we'll be able to better and more smoothly integrate other renewables like wind and solar into our grid and reduce emissions. Commissioner Caputo, I was struck by your testimony when you acknowledged the need for NRC to quote, innovate with an eye toward the future, because that's what we're looking for in Washington State. And you acknowledge that NRC must follow congressional intent to develop, again, quote, a framework that is truly risk-informed, reflecting the inherent safety found in advanced designs. And I think that's critical, and I think it also pertains to Mr. Curtis's line of questioning about how much more quickly we should be able to do this. I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on this point and how you're taking into account the difference in risk. Maybe what are some of your challenges? How can we help?
Well, when the Commission directed the staff to proceed with the rulemaking, one of the elements of that direction was to direct the staff to apply the same safety standards as the existing fleet. By having advanced reactors meet that same level of safety, it allows those reactors, through the technology, to take credit for aspects of their design that may provide inherent safety just based on the technology itself. And I think that is perhaps the most important aspect that we need to focus on in Part 53.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pivot to another question, also about Washington State, which is Hanford. And I know that this is primarily a Department of Energy issue, but since I have your expertise in front of me, I'd love to know if any of you have reservations, technical reservations, about the Department of Energy reclassifying some of its low-activity waste to something other than high-level waste, because it would change how we can dispose of that. If it's low level, it can be disposed of in a grouting process, and high level needs to go through vitrification, which is far more complex. Just wondering if any of you have any comments about that safety.
I admit, Congresswoman, I'm loath to wade into those waters, but I will note that.
So am I.
But the classification system that we have in this country is largely based on origin and not based on radioactivity. So sometimes high-level waste, regardless of the activity level, is high-level waste because it is spent nuclear fuel or originates from reprocessing operations.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Anybody else want to wade into this?
I agree with the chair. It's primarily classified by the origin. So the characteristics of the waste itself may be substantially different based on where it's not based on where it's classified. So if there's a classification done to more reflect the nature of the waste itself, then there may be a scientific basis for doing that rather than hewing to the historical classification based on origin.
Thank you. That's really interesting and really reassuring, and that is why I asked you that question. Thank you very much, and I will yield back.
Julie yields back. We'll stay in the Evergreen State, and it's my distinct pleasure to recognize the chairwoman of the full committee, Ms. McMorris Rogers, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Duncan and I, along with ranking members DeGette and Pallone, wrote together to a range of nuclear stakeholders in April seeking information about NRC licensing and oversight activities. And we wanted to, quote, identify what makes sense for a modern regulator to assure efficient, predictable regulation that provides for a robust and growing nuclear industry. And this is keeping with the goals of the Atomic Energy Act. Chairman Hanson and commissioners, an indisputable part of your mission is to protect public health and safety. However, your authorities derive from the Atomic Energy Act, which has broader goals. I'd like to ask each of you, beginning with the chairman, to describe how you would define NRC's success as a regulator in the context of the policy to provide for a robust and growing industry. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairwoman Rogers, for that question. Our success, I think, I met with a utility executive recently that described the NRC as a tough regulator but a fair regulator. I took that as a point of pride, and I think we can always be improving the efficiency of that and the predictability of our regulations. And I think you're seeing an emphasis on that across the commission as we move forward, and an adaptability and creativity in achieving those aims while protecting public health and safety.
Yeah, I think we need to do two things at the same time. One, maintain our focus on public health and safety, and two, have an effective, efficient, and timely licensing process, both of those things.
Thank you for the question. And I agree with what my colleagues are saying here. And I was present when I heard the comment as well about being a tough but fair regulator. But I would say that we do a pretty poor job of talking about our successes and how maybe the good things that we do. And because I'm a believer, if you don't tout your successes, you're going to be defined by your failures. So there are a lot of good things that are going on, but we certainly can do better.
I think I'll get back to a comment that Mr. Bouchon made, which relates to naval submarines. When the Navy approves a submarine, it really is a dual mission, which is safety, but also to enable the mission. And our mission as a regulator is purely safety. So I think there's room there to consider a little more balanced approach, because we are, as I said in my opening statement, gatekeepers to a nuclear future, and we need to, I think, focus on the fact that while safety is our preeminent role, we do have a responsibility to ensure timely decision-making so that we can actually enable the safe development of nuclear power. Thank you.
And Congressman, I'll just add that while protecting public health and safety are the primary goals and responsibility of the NRC, if we're meeting that mission, but we're not doing so on a timeline that's commensurate with addressing reducing carbon emissions and enhancing energy security, then I don't think we are succeeding. I think we need to be doing both.
Okay, thank you. To help set the commission up for success, Congress enacted reforms in 2019 to update its fee schedule and directed NRC to issue risk-informed regulations appropriate for advanced reactors. My understanding is the staff spent about 2 years putting together a proposal, the Part 53 proposal, yet they've been informed time and time again that the new regulations that they were putting together ignored stakeholder input, and future applicants would not use the rule as it was proposed. And then staff chose to send a rule that they knew wouldn't work to the commission to fix. Something isn't right with that whole situation. So I wanted to start with the chairman and however time we have. Why is staff putting together rules that fail to comply with congressional direction, and what does this say about the staff working in service to the Atomic Energy Act, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you. While I'm certainly not going to endorse or agree with all the things that the staff sent, we asked them to put together that rule very quickly. And I think as a result, there's a high level of what I would call adjacency to our existing frameworks that are not necessarily conducive to the new technologies that are coming down the road.
So quickly, 2 years and they ignored stakeholder input.
Well, I think in some cases, both the Framework A and Framework B were included and structured that way at the behest of stakeholders.
Okay, more to follow. I yield back.
Happy to.
You could add some extra time. You are the chairwoman. I'll now go to Florida, Ms. Castor, Sunshine State, 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling this hearing. It's been a good bipartisan collaboration here, and I want to thank the NRC commissioners for your public service and being here today. If we're going to slash climate pollution with the urgency that is needed to avoid the worsening impacts and the escalating costs, we have got to rely more on this carbon-free energy source, nuclear power, that is consistent in its output over long periods of time. We have learned a lot over the past few years. There has been a shift in thinking because of the climate crisis. In fact, when I had the pleasure of chairing the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis, we invited nuclear energy industry experts in to advise us and to help craft policies, and it resulted in our action plan report that had a number of recommendations relating to nuclear power that were subsequently incorporated into the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the IRA, CHIPS and Science Act. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law provided $6 billion for the Civil Nuclear Credit Program, funds that will help ensure that our already existing fleet of nuclear reactors stays safe and competitive, and it also will save thousands of jobs over time. The Inflation Reduction Act created a tax credit of up to 1.8 cents per kilowatt hour for zero-emission nuclear energy and provided the Department of Energy with $700 million to invest in increasing the availability of next-generation nuclear fuel for advanced reactors. And the President's proposed budget this year includes $1 billion investment in the NRC, including an 8% increase in nuclear reactor safety. Commissioner Barron, you highlighted this in your testimony. You said the urgency and scale of the challenge have led to a growing consensus that meeting ambitious climate and energy security goals will involve nuclear power, including new reactors. The bipartisan infrastructure legislation and the IRA make large investments to drive this expansion, including the Clean Energy Production Tax Credit and funding for a domestic high-assay, low-enriched uranium supply chain. Few, if any, nuclear power plants are expected to close anytime soon. So when you think of life before these new federal laws, if they hadn't happened, what would the picture look like, Mr. Chairman, if you compare life before the infrastructure law, the IRA, CHIPS and Science, where would we be today?
There are a lot of issues. I call it a series of chicken and egg problems associated with the deployment of new nuclear, and certainly the financing and the policy around those can be one of them, and certainly NRC regulation I recognize is one as well. For us, as regulators, we see a renewed interest in the continued operation of the existing fleet. So we're expecting both subsequent license renewal applications as a result of the law, as well as power uprate applications, and then also requests for evaluation of perhaps new fuel forms so that these reactors can operate at potentially higher output levels, et cetera, to take full advantage of that and deliver more clean energy to the grid.
Commissioner Barron?
Yeah, I think in talking with our licensees, the utilities, you really see an almost immediate transformation in the way they were thinking about things. The price signals sent by the legislation were really significant. There were very few people talking about power uprates, those kinds of investments in the plant to get more electricity out of them prior to the legislation. Now there's a lot of talk about that. There was talk, obviously, about subsequent license renewal going from 60 to 80 at a lot of plants. Now it's like kind of near universal. I mean, the whole value proposition has changed enough that it was almost like a switch. I mean, you could just see the effect of it. When I was talking with Tennessee Valley Authority, not that long ago, they were talking about one small modular reactor at the Clinch River site in Tennessee. Then it was 4 identical ones there. Then it was 4, and maybe they do 4 more at other sites if that goes well. So it's really ramped up the interest. I mean, there's a real surge in interest now.
Commissioner Wright?
I do not disagree with anything that my colleagues have said. I would also add that there's something else that could be taken advantage of, and that is through, I believe it's NECA, where you could use monies that are funded through DOE that would come back to the commission to help some of these small vendors that are trying to get moving because they don't have deep pockets, right? And you could help identify issues that are maybe barriers that could be solved early. And that would also, again, it would save money on the licensee or the applicant's part as well.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm out of time. I yield back.
Generally, time's expired, and I'll go to Ms. Lesko, who has the Palo Verde nuclear power plant in her district. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday, we had a hearing here we discussed grid reliability and all of the different concerns there are from different government organizations about grid reliability and that we're retiring baseload energy plants too fast and replacing them with intermittent energy. And so I do believe nuclear is part of the solution. So I thank you for your work in making sure our nuclear plants are safe. My questions are for anyone that wants to weigh in. My first question says the NRC sends inspectors to the nuclear plants to inspect machinery and for safeguards. Nuclear plants like the one in Arizona have full-time government inspectors that stay on site. I have been told that in addition to these on-site inspectors, NRC sends out additional inspectors that the nuclear plants pay for, and that these inspectors may be duplicating some of the work that the on-site inspectors do. In addition, I have been told that during COVID, remote technology was used to conduct, sometimes used to conduct the inspections. And so my question is, do you think it would make sense to better utilize the on-site inspectors and use remote technology for some of the inspections?
Yeah, thank you, Congresswoman. We learned a lot during COVID about how to better use technology and everything from laptops and iPads and this sort of thing to help conduct inspections. I hope that there's not a lot of duplication. I'll dive into that for you and be happy to get back to you about the duplication that our on-site resident inspectors are conducting and then our engineering inspectors. We recently made a change at the Commission to reduce the frequency of engineering inspections, actually from 3 years to 4 years, to kind of account for the reduced, I would say, kind of the reduced need to do a deep dive with some of these visiting inspectors that you mentioned.
Yes, Ms. Caputo.
Some of that virtual technology that resident inspectors were able to use was to conduct routine monitoring of plant parameters. And by, I think, making their time more efficient, it frees them up to pursue other activities that are more safety significant. So I believe there are probably opportunities to do some of that and upskill our resident inspectors so we rely less on regional inspectors and help our residents to cover more ground. So I think there's room for efficiency there. But yes, all of these inspections are paid by licensees.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah, Mr. Wright.
So this is an area that we really listen to our residents. So when I go into plants, and I know my colleagues do as well, we meet with them. And one of the questions that we ask them is, what is it that you're doing on site in your inspections that you think could be done better or done differently? Because because they are the boots on the ground, they need to be there. But they can also help us, we can't, from the top, that's not where we should be doing it. It needs to bubble up from the bottom where the boots are on the ground, so.
Okay, great. Thank you. Oh, yes.
I would just add, I think a lot of the work that the resident inspectors do and then the regional inspection team is very complementary. The residents are there day to day, walking down the plant, ensuring the safety day to day. But then we have specialized teams, maybe cybersecurity or a particular type of engineering inspection. And those folks are real specialists in those areas. And that's why we deploy the teams as well. But one of the things we learned a couple things, I think, during the COVID period. One, the value of having boots on the ground and really seeing things firsthand. That there's, in-person inspection, the actual inspection part of looking at equipment was really better than remote. But there was stuff that we could do remotely. There's a certain amount of, it's not trivial, but like paperwork review, looking through the licensing documents ahead to prepare the inspectors before they go. That's stuff we don't have to have the folks there on site doing, and it saves time and money to have people do that back at headquarters. So I think there are lessons we
I'm glad you're
learned.
looking into this. I only have a few seconds left. The Nuclear Energy Institute has suggested the following addition to your mission statement. Ensure that the regulation of nuclear activities is efficient and does not unnecessarily limit the potential of nuclear technology to maximize its contribution to the benefit of society. Do you agree with their recommendation? Anyone?
We have principles of good regulation, and efficiency is one of those, along with openness, reliability, independence, and clarity. And so every day we strive to live up to our principles of good regulation, and efficiency is a key one of those.
Yes, Mr. Wright.
I would just like to add, if we're going to start talking about putting it in policy, and we've got it in our principles of good regulation, then it ought to be in the other areas too, to be consistent.
Okay, thank you, and my time has run out. Thank you, and I yield back.
Young lady's time's expired. Now go to Mr. Cardenas for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman Duncan and Ranking Member DeGette, for holding today's hearing, and appreciate the Chairman and Commissioners of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for being here today and sharing your thoughts. As it stands, 79% of our electricity comes from fossil fuels, making the power sector the second largest share of greenhouse gas emissions nationwide. If we're going to be significantly cut carbon pollution, it's undeniable that we will need to utilize carbon-free and reliable energy sources. On the front end, nuclear seems like an ideal zero-carbon electricity source, and I appreciate the committee's ongoing discussion about its role in building out a clean energy economy. However, as I've mentioned in previous hearings, I have concerns about the legacy of toxic waste associated with nuclear energy, and believe that to ensure the long-term health and safety of communities, we must find more permanent storage solutions. As the Commission overseeing the safety and licensing of our nation's nuclear reactors and interim storage facilities, I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak with you about these concerns today. Chairman Hanson, can you describe the federal standards and processes in place that ensure safety when storing low-level and high-level waste and interim storage facilities, and how are environmental impacts and community input considered during the licensing process of interim storage facilities?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman, for that question. When we have standards for storage facilities, as you mentioned, and they're focused on containing the radioactive material, providing radiation shielding for the people who work around those spent fuel canisters, preventing nuclear criticality, so making sure that we've got the right kind of materials in those casks that prevents a nuclear chain reaction, and also maintaining retrievability. That is, if something goes in a concrete cask, that you can pull that out again should the need arise, essentially. Post-Fukushima, we also required additional instrumentation on spent fuel pools to maintain water levels. So we've got and we have a robust inspection protocol for those spent fuel storage systems as well.
So everything you just described, somebody can't get at a container store.
I'm sorry?
Somebody can't get what you just described at a container store. These are very specialized, highly engineered, proven techniques, thank God, that we have available to us today.
Correct.
And that's part of the process of properly storing spent fuels.
Absolutely. Highly engineered barriers.
Okay, thank you. How long are interim storage facilities intended to hold nuclear waste? And how common is it for these facilities to hold nuclear waste for longer than the agreed upon time?
Well, most of the spent fuel storage facilities at operating reactors are licensed along with the reactor. So it would be, as long as that reactor has its operating license, the spent fuel storage facility will as well. When that reactor shuts down, there's some regulatory boxes to check there that then transitions that to a standalone facility. We license storage casks for an initial period of 40 years and then up to an additional 40 years.
But this spent fuel, these byproducts, they are dangerous for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, 1,000 years, about how long?
The initial fission products, the real heat off of that, the heat declines really reasonably precipitously, the thermal heat, but the radioactivity then, the high amounts probably 500-ish years, and then some of the long-lived radioisotopes can be much longer than
500 years, so a lot longer than any of us may be in Congress, or you might be a commissioner, right? Multiple times longer.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Now, I just wanted to get, for the average American to understand what we're talking about here. We're not talking about, okay, storing things for 5 or 10 or 15, 20 years. We're talking about super duper long term.
Well, in the near term, we have reasonable assurance that the systems that we use to store spent fuel are safe and protective of the public.
But also as a society, we need to make sure that longer than tens of years, that there's a way to make sure that people don't just say, well, I'm done. It's been 20, 30 years. We can just leave it alone and stop monitoring it. And so this is a process it's going to be around for a long time.
Yeah. Congressman, you've identified a key policy issue about about spent fuel storage and its connection to ultimate disposal.
Okay, thank you. My time expiring, I just wanted to remind everybody that we really appreciate you very much, and any recommendations you can make to us, we look forward to it. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Chairman yields back. I'll now go to Mr. Pence from Indiana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the commissioners for being here today. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission is critical to deploying innovative nuclear resources for our grid to provide zero-emission baseload power, as my colleague next to me talked about a minute ago. I'm encouraged that under Chairman Duncan's leadership, this committee can advance important reforms to streamline licensing for nuclear assets and lay the groundwork to deploy next-generation reactors. In the Hoosier state, my state, innovators are leading the way to power the next generation of nuclear energy. Purdue University is a national leader in nuclear engineering programs and home to the country's first and only fully digitalized nuclear reactor used to train students and research cyber-physical protection. Recently, the university released a completed feasibility study with Duke Energy to bring a small modular reactor to power their campus. Similarly, Rolls-Royce, with facilities in Indianapolis, is advancing their designs for transportable small modular reactors to provide 470 megawatts of baseload power. Chairman Hanson, SMRs have been defined as generating 300 megawatts of power or less. Rolls-Royce has developed an innovative design that produces 470. Given these innovative designs, how do you view SMRs above the 300 megawatt threshold?
Thank you, Congressman. I don't think that there's anything particularly magical about the 300 megawatt threshold, and a lot of the safety issues, I think, would be very similar between 300 megawatts and 470. So from a regulatory standpoint, there shouldn't be any additional, depending on the design and a lot of other things being equal, should be relatively straightforward.
So do designs such as those from Rolls-Royce present different challenges from a licensing perspective?
I'd have to understand a little bit more about the specifics. It can, but oftentimes, and we encourage this with pre-application engagements where people are coming to us and talking about maybe the unique aspects of their design and getting kind of a pre-sign-off. We can sign off on that stuff in advance of them getting that application in. That often works very well to resolve those issues.
I think your colleague would like to comment on this as well.
One difference I'd like to point out is indemnification under the Price-Anderson Act. I believe the threshold is 300 megawatts. So the insurance required and the participation under that indemnification framework would probably be slightly different for the reactor at 470 because it would be treated more akin to the larger operating units that exist today. So below that 300 megawatt threshold, small modular reactors operate under a different price structure.
Okay, thank you. Kind of changing horses here a little bit. Last month, Purdue University and Duke Energy's feasibility study included important policy recommendations to advance nuclear energy for our state and nation. As part of their findings, the report detailed the need for a highly skilled workforce to design, build, and operate the fleet of next-generation reactors. And all of you talked about training and hiring and looking forward with personnel. To help maintain and build this workforce, the NRC has supported critical nuclear science and engineering initiatives through the University Leadership Program. However, the NRC's FY24 budget request did not include any funding for this program, which I hope is corrected and is included in some way. What gaps, Chairman, do you see in the current workforce for next-generation reactors, and could the University Leadership Program be helpful to meet these needs?
Thank you, Congressman. The University Nuclear Leadership Program is already helping meet these needs. We're getting graduates out of these programs with expertise in material science, nuclear engineering, fuels, et cetera. It's been a real asset.
Is the program robust enough?
It is. I believe it is robust enough, and
providing you a lot of options.
It is. Because we're both funding research activities at places like Purdue and other big programs, but also then we're just funding fellowships and scholarships for students as well, but just academic support.
Okay. How can the NRC leverage expertise of leading universities like Purdue to meet the challenges posed by SMRs in particular and other transportable reactors of the future? Anyone with 15 seconds left?
I think universities play a really important role, in part by building some of these new innovative designs at a small scale. So Abilene Christian, University of Illinois, Purdue, et cetera, I think have a real...
So there'll probably be something in the budget as we go forward then, I would assume. Thank you. I'm out of time. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the gentleman, and she's been patiently waiting, so I'll go to Texas, the Lone Star State, to Ms. Fletcher for 5 minutes.
I was waiting for that Lone Star State. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to Ranking Member DeGette for having this hearing. Thank you to the chairman and all the commissioners for being here and spending your time with us this morning. I think we've seen from today's hearing that there's wide bipartisan agreement that nuclear energy plays an essential role in our system of generating reliable, carbon-free baseload power. And advances in next-generation nuclear technologies, including SMRs that we were just talking about and have talked about a lot today, offer real potential advancements that could increase efficiency, can improve cost, safety, and versatility for our electric grid. These are very important issues to those of us in Texas, and something that we're working on, not surprisingly, as well. Chairman Duncan mentioned in his opening that NEMA required NRC to create a new regulatory framework for advanced nuclear reactors to speed up the development of next-generation technology. And as Ranking Member DeGette noted, we've heard from a lot of stakeholders, especially at our hearing in April, that the proposed rule is overly complicated, that it needs to change to provide functionality and really to make it possible for this advanced nuclear reactor sector to grow. So, as I said, Mr. Pence was just asking about SMRs, and really they have a great potential to lower emissions in a variety of industries, and that's something that we're focused on, which I expect my colleague, Mr. Weber, who represents the Texas Gulf Coast, may mention next, but I want to raise that X Energy, in partnership with Dow Chemical, recently announced that they would be deploying first grid-scale advanced reactor at a site along the Texas Gulf Coast. The project, once deployed, could open a new frontier for advanced nuclear applications in the industrial sector, creating an effective pathway to help energy-intensive industries lower their carbon emissions, while at the same time providing reliable power to support our domestic supply chains. While many of these reactors in development haven't shared if they plan to use Part 53, it's important that the NRC issue a rule that allows these innovative technologies to be developed. And as we've discussed, I think some of the considerations that Congress intended in NEMA don't seem to be included in this rule to develop a technology-inclusive regulatory framework that is risk-informed and performance-based. So, like I said, we've heard from a variety of stakeholders. I would love to get your input on Part 53, and maybe if each of you could share your thoughts. As the NRC continues to revise the proposed rule, how can a risk-informed approach be better incorporated to recognize risk significance when it comes to advanced nuclear technology? And Chairman Hanson, I'd love to start with you and then just go down the line.
Thank you. The staff did tee up, I think, a number of key policy issues about Part 53, whether or not there should be one framework or two, the appropriate role of as low as reasonably achievable, the role of risk assessment and probabilistic risk assessments, and the role of the design. And along with my colleagues, I think our staffs are meeting on a weekly basis to basically work our way through these policy issues, understand the entire picture of what that rule should look like, and I think to achieve some potential simplification on that. I think we're all sensitive to the concern that folks perceive it to be complicated, et cetera. So we're diving into that, trying to understand the technical basis for that, and then diving into what our options might be around that to have something that's technology inclusive, risk informed, et cetera.
Great, thanks.
It's hard to add much to that. I mean, I agree with everything that the chair said. I guess I would just say, I think we're all focused on getting the substance of the rule right. You know, there's a lot to digest. We're digesting it. We're talking about it. Our staffs are looking at it. I think we've identified the key issues, some of which the chair just talked about. And we want to make sure in the end, at least speaking for myself, that we have an efficient and effective framework. And so that's the goal, and there's some more work still to do there. And then, you know, not to take us off Part 53, there are other pieces we've got to get in place too for the whole overall framework.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Wright?
Thank you so much. First off, it's got to be used and useful, right, for the people that are going to use it. And we've heard from stakeholders out there that they haven't been listened to. I can tell you that's one of the things that we are doing. My team, my staff we're talking to everybody who said they weren't paid attention to, so we want to hear from them and see if if they've got suggestions that make sense, we're going to put it in. We're going to talk about it.
Great, thanks. And I just have a few seconds left. Commissioner Caputo?
I agree with most of what's been said. I think I also agree with a comment made earlier. I'm a bit struggling with the nature of the staff having sent us a draft proposed rule that the vast majority of the industry considers unworkable. So what I have done is task my reactor aide with proceeding through the rule on a line-by-line basis to ensure that we can, that at least the vote that I cast is the best framework possible to be issued as a proposed rule, and that we are sending something forward that will meet the intent of NEMA and be workable and even beneficial over the existing frameworks.
Okay, and Commissioner Crowell, in 2 seconds, I'm way over time. Or you can add it for the record.
I'll add it for the record.
Wonderful,
I
that'd
generally
be
agree
great.
with my colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much, and I yield back.
You're welcome. Thank you. And now go to Mr. Weber, also from Texas.
Thank you, and I appreciate y'all being here. I had South Texas Nuclear Project when I was in the state legislature, and we got to go there in 2010 and watch them change out spent fuel rods. It's absolutely fascinating. They can do it cleanly, they can do it safely. Do y'all have a periodic schedule where you go to the different plants and watch those kinds of activities? Mr. Chairman, I'll start with you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm headed out to the Midwest next week to go to LaSalle and to the new medical isotope facility in Wisconsin. I was in California a couple weeks ago. So I try to hit as many as I can.
Do all the commissioners have a similar format to checking, seeing that process take place? Y'all too?
I'm going to add a little bit more to it. I actually go and spend a day, what I call an inspector for a day. I go and spend a whole day with the resident inspectors doing the walk downs and doing what they do.
Okay, well, if you come to South Texas Nuclear Plant, they have alligators in their water pond, cooling pond, and they taste like chicken, just so you know.
I was going to say, they taste like chicken.
Yeah, sure. Ma'am?
South Texas is one of the plants that I have seen, and yes, it's a very impressive facility. I think one of the things that gives me a little pause going forward is the commission budget has operated at the same level since 2014, with the exception of a couple years. So I think we are getting to a point where there are potentially some constraints on staffing and perhaps travel. So I think we're trying to work our way through that.
Commissioner?
Just it's incredibly important part of the role as a commissioner is to visit sites that we regulate, not just for the benefit of the site, but also so you can be an ambassador for and reassuring the public about the safety case at the NRC, be it at a particular site or anywhere in the country.
Yeah, Commissioner, did we skip you?
Yeah, no, I've been to about, I think about maybe 40 of the operating sites at this point, and
Okay.
I learn a lot every time, and it's very valuable.
To my colleague that said that he was concerned about waste being handled safely, they had a video that showed them with a really super big steel container that they put waste in. They put it on the flatbed of a rail car, chained it all down, and then they rammed it into a concrete barrier at 60 miles an hour. And of course, the chains break and the container goes spinning off, but it doesn't fail. And so if we could somehow get that word out to American public that we can handle waste cleanly and safely. Any of y'all been to I'm sure you know about Andrews County, Texas Waste Control Specials, low level. Have any of y'all been there?
I was just there last week, and I think they do an admirable job and could do more. And I do agree with your point that I don't think the public appreciates the robustness of waste packaging and transport, and it's really, it's impressive. It's world class.
Yeah. So how do we get that? How do we get a high level waste facility like that? That's up to us, isn't it? Yeah. What we ought to do is aim at someplace in Nevada in the mountains. See how that works for us. So in Winter Storm Uri 2 years ago, February, the water cooling system on South Texas Nuclear Project, one of them failed. Now we have Unit 1 and Unit 2. When I was in the State House, they used to brag that Unit 1 produced more electricity for households than any other unit in the country. And Unit 2 was number 3. I don't know who snuck in there between us, because in Texas we like being in the lead. They produce household electricity. So did y'all get to see the setup? You've been there to Waste Control Special. Have you been to South Texas lately? Did I miss that? Who's been there most lately? Has anybody been to South Texas Nuclear Project? You have. When was that?
I think it was shortly before that storm.
Winter Storm Uri in February?
Yeah.
2 years ago? Anybody else?
But I was able, having been there, to talk with folks from the plant about the nature of what caused that one outage to go down.
Right.
Because both of those plants are more or less, required to be prepared and protect against extreme weather events. And as it turns out, I think it was a 6-foot piece of insulation that had not been put back after some recent work. So, so it was an oversight in terms of not following procedures, but
Funny how that
otherwise they
happened.
were in
Just
good shape.
take 50% of the capacity. And it got 18 degrees on the Gulf Coast of Texas. I've grown up in 20-mile radius 70 years. I've never seen it 18 degrees on Galveston Island. Have y'all been to Galveston Island? We do want you to come down there and spend lots of money. But thank y'all for what you do. I just want to make sure that y'all are watching and paying attention and getting out there in the field, because There's a lot of jobs involved, there's a lot of energy and electricity involved in it, so I appreciate what y'all do. Thank you. I yield back.
Chairman yields back. We'll stay in Texas. Go to Mr. Vesey for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Chairman Hanson and the commissioners for coming here today. Nuclear technology has been in use for decades now in the U.S., and it still produces about a fifth of U.S. electricity with little or no carbon emissions. We use it in Texas on ERCOT, and it's been a good, reliable source of energy for a lot of Texans. And from Germany to California, places planning to retire their reactors have now really started to have second thoughts on that. I know as Germany in particular, they're burning a record amount of coal partly because of Ukraine's unlawful invasion of Russia's unlawful invasion of Ukraine. And as you know, we in Texas are in a similar situation where the Comanche Peak nuclear power plant is currently seeking relicensing just outside of my district there in Johnson County. And it's just not the relicensing of existing plants. The Department of Energy released a report in March that estimated U.S. domestic nuclear capacity has the potential to scale from approximately 100 gigawatts in 2023 to about 300 gigawatts by 2050, driven by deployment of advanced nuclear technologies. One of these new technologies is being led by Natura Resources and sponsored at Abilene Christian University, which I've had really great interaction with that group from Abilene Christian there to my west. And I know that potential new additions of safe, reliable, affordable, and clean nuclear power, like those being developed and demonstrated at places like Abilene Christian, are going to be essential to U.S. security, U.S. energy security, and the deployment of new advanced reactor technology that is going to be crucial for us to be able to compete with Russia and China in the global nuclear industry. For new nuclear technology to get us to these goals, these reactors need to be licensed at a quick pace by NRC at scale. And my question is that I understand last week Commissioner Barron submitted a memo to the chair and colleagues calling for the development of a policy statement on effectiveness and efficiency for new reactor reviews. I'd like to know from each of the commissioners and the chairman, do you support commission action to address the elements outlined in Commissioner Barron's memo, and where do you think current efforts may need redoubling to meet the expectations ahead?
Thank you, Congressman. I certainly support the objectives of Commissioner Barron's memo.
Thank you.
Well, having authored the memo, I would just say I look forward to my colleagues' thoughts about it, their ideas and suggestions, and I wanted to get the conversation started.
So yes, I spoke with Commissioner Barron about it Friday, I believe it was, when he brought it to us, but I'm also working with my colleague Commissioner Caputo on another approach as well that brings some urgency to the situation as well.
I'm thrilled to see him interested in timely licensing, and I fully expect to vote yes on the process. My concern is that by the time a policy statement goes through notice and comment, it could be quite some time before it's in place, perhaps as long as 3 years or more. So I think a very important complement to his memorandum would be the one that Commissioner Wright and I are working on to try and put metrics in place in the near term.
I think Commissioner Barron's proposal is both timely and appropriate, and I do support it.
Thank you very much. So what additional support does the NRC need from Congress to aid the effective and efficient review of advanced reactor technologies? And anyone can answer that.
Congressman, I guess I would kind of focus on two things. One is just additional hiring authorities. So we've got that flexibility in the way we bring people on. It's not to say that we need a lot more people necessarily. I think I've been pretty consistent in saying that we both need to bring new people into the agency and also change the way we work. And I guess the other thing then is that some off-fee money where we're not relying on folks to come to us with a specific product in order to get up to speed on some of these reactors and some of the technologies and the novel approaches that people are using. I would kind of maybe focus on those two things to start.
As I mentioned earlier, I think Congress giving us statutory relief or discretion, at least in the conduct of mandatory hearings, I think it would be very helpful. I think certain amount of discretion with regard to the reviews that are conducted by our advisory committee on reactor safeguards would also create some efficiencies. And beyond that, there's a question about whether companies that manufacture microreactors or even small reactors have the authority to manufacture fully and do some limited testing before shipping to the end user. So there might be a benefit to creating some clarity in that area to enable reactor manufacturers to do limited testing in-house before shipping to the final user.
Thank you very much. My time has expired.
Thank you, John, for yielding back. I'll go to Mr. Palmer from Alabama for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nuclear energy has the potential to transform our energy production. We need affordable energy, but we also need clean energy, but we desperately need reliable energy. And I think nuclear energy can provide that. And one of the things that I try to point out to people, particularly with next generation nuclear, you could site one next-gen nuclear facility on 640 acres of land to generate the same amount of power, or have the same power generation from a wind farm would take 77,000 acres. That doesn't even take into account the enormous impact that we'll have in terms of mining and the extraction of the various elements and components that you have to even begin to think about building a wind or solar farm. So Commissioner Caputo, today the NRC, and it's along the lines of what you were just talking about, I think, requires an environmental impact statement for every new reactor, even for reactors that are 1/100th or 1/1000th the size of traditional reactors. It just seems like that's overly burdensome. And so I guess I'll direct this to all of you. Do you commit to supporting changes to the NRC's regulations to allow the use of different types of environmental reviews, such as environmental assessments or categorical exclusions based on the actual environmental impact of a reactor?
Without seeing specifics or a specific proposal, I would generally look favorably on those types of activities to streamline our environmental reviews. These reviews are, given that licensing is a major federal action subject to NEPA, but within the bound of our authorities under NEPA, I would be interested in those kinds of proposals.
Well, in your testimony, you mentioned the importance of agency innovating with an eye to the future.
Yes, sir.
And this is where I am on this, is looking at, and I know it's been mentioned by a couple of my colleagues who've already raised this point about the fact that next-gen nuclear can recycle spent fuel rods. You can recover 96% of the recoverable usable material, and what's left can be used for other purposes, for instance, nuclear medicine. And one of the things that I want to point out, we had a hearing in here, and we had the director of the National Nuclear Laboratory, and I asked if we went in this direction, considering that there's 39 states where we have spent nuclear fuel in storage. I asked, had he run the calculations to determine how long we could operate our power our country with the spent fuel rod, spent fuel, and he said that he had actually run the numbers. Do any of you have a hazard, a guess, how long we could do that?
I think it's pretty hard to put a number on it. It depends on the type of reactor as well. The numbers that you're using, 96%, 96% of it is reusable, but of that 96, there's only a couple % that actually generates fuel in a conventional reactor. So it actually has to be topped up with a little bit of fresh. But advanced reactors or fast reactors are able to harness the energy in the rest of the 96 and to even perhaps get rid of some of that 4%. So there's a higher efficiency. It would take a significant number of fast reactors to work through the spent fuel that we have currently, but that opportunity, I think, is there to work that off over a long period of time.
His response was he thought it would last 100 years, which I think that's part of what we need to take into account. And your point, too, you would have to have additional fresh fuel into the mix to make this work properly. But the point is that we can build these. They have an operational life cycle of minimum 40 years and could operate much longer than that. And they operate 24/7, providing reliable fuel. And they're only shut down when you're doing maintenance on a reactor.
If this was Dr. Gaheen from Idaho National Lab, he might have talked about technologies that Idaho National Lab pioneered, which actually, through use in a fast reactor, would consume most of the long-lived products in the fuel, generating a waste product which would decay below the level of natural uranium over a span of about 400 years. So the lifespan of the waste product itself that would come at the end of that process would be much, much shorter lived than what we currently face.
Yep. Well, Mr. Chairman, my time has expired. I yield back.
Thank you, the gentleman. I now go to Mr. Sarbanes for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all. Chairman Hanson, just wondered before I get to my main question, if you could speak, if you are able to the safety activities that NRC's undertaken recently in Maryland around the safety of the Calvert Cliffs plant, and just be curious how that's going in your view.
Congressman, I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of the details in front of me on the specifics on Calvert Cliffs. I'm happy to get back to you
That'd be
for the
great.
record or reach out to your office.
Appreciate it very much. So we've had a lot of discussion of the Part 53 draft, and there's some concerns about the input and so forth that has happened around that. Could you just, for my benefit, because I think it's been assumed a lot in the conversation, describe what I think it's 2 frameworks are that are contained within the draft, A and B? What are they? What are the differences between the two? What are the implications of that for the process going forward?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'll do it as briefly as I can.
Great, yeah.
Framework A is based on the industry-developed, what they call the licensing modernization project, which is really where risk information takes kind of a leading role. You've got, if you're a vendor, you've got sufficient information about your design. You can conduct those risk analyses to identify the most safety significant aspects and then present those to the NRC. In Framework B, it is more traditional approach like what we have in 50 and 52, but with a lot of the light water reactor specific elements kind of stripped out. It is more deterministic. It recognizes that maybe you don't have that super detailed design or you don't have a lot of that extra scientific information, so we're going to build some extra either operational requirements or physical envelope around that reactor to ensure safety. There's a third little piece of that. It's kind of Framework B light, which is really for microreactors as well in there.
Okay, and can you describe where you think ultimately, to the extent you can, this whole new frontier around advanced reactors is taking us? What's the portfolio going to look like between the more kind of traditional approach that we've seen in terms of nuclear capacity and the space that will now be occupied, and I assume it will be a growing space occupied by these advanced reactors. What's that look like, assuming all the regulations go the way they should, or you hope they do, and the trajectory rolls out over the next few years, 10, 15, 20 years, if you could look forward, what's the broad portfolio look like in terms of the relative, participation of those two things?
Yeah, with the caveat that predicting the future is hard, as Yogi Berra said. I would say that we're likely to have a kind of a broad portfolio of different, of very different technologies. So a pressurized water reactor, a boiling water reactor, a high temperature gas reactor, molten salt, et cetera, and then standardized designs in each of those fields that allows for kind of broader deployment. What we have in this country right now with the initial fleet was we have a lot of pressurized water reactors, we have a lot of boiling water reactors, and every one of them is a little bit different, either in the aspects of the design or on the secondary side being really the electricity generation side. So I would see a real move to standardization, and that I think makes the regulatory process substantially easier and more efficient as well.
Okay, one other question. How does our progress in this regard compare to what's happening with peer nations around the globe? Do you see us moving in a way that demonstrates leadership here? Just describe the larger ecosystem in which you operate.
I think we do have some leadership, particularly in our partnership with Canada and the UK. I think the three of us are moving very closely together, deploying and evaluating similar kinds of technology. I think other countries are coming along, other allies, France, Korea, Japan, et cetera. They're taking their time a little bit more and certainly engaging in some technology development efforts, but maybe are a little bit behind that. But I would say that the U.S. and these three key nations are in a leading role.
Great. Thanks very much. I yield back.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen, and I'll now go to the Bluegrass State. Mr. Guthrie for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate that for recognizing the Bluegrass State. We are also Energy State, and so I wanted to ask a couple of questions. One for Commissioner Caputo and Commissioner Wright, if you would add as well. So power providers in my district, we're famous for coal. Kentucky's been Kentucky Coal. They've started establishing nuclear energy generation. We're interested in now that there's some switching to, or making some changes. But we're being quoted our providers a 10-year timeline to get reactors online, including like small modular reactors. So Commissioner Caputo, do you have any suggestions for cutting on down the time it takes to get a new reactor online without compromising public safety? It'd be helpful if you could outline some of the key steps in the licensing process, and then Commissioner Wright, if you would add to that as well.
Sure.
Helpful.
One of the comments that staff and the commission make prolifically is we really need to see complete high-quality applications. To the extent that a licensee really strikes a balance between ensuring that we have all the information that we know and that there is enough information for us to reach decisions, I think is an important way to start. We also encourage pre-application engagement to more or less, particularly with novel technologies, acquaint us with the nature of what's going to be in the application when it comes forward and ensure that the design is well developed. This, I think, is a process that can be very beneficial. I think in the case of the NuScale review that was mentioned earlier, this pre-application phase went on for 8 years. So I think it's incumbent upon us to ensure that the pre-application engagement that's going on is efficient and effective, but also on the applicant to ensure that they are well developed. From there, we go into a review process, which while we are aspiring to achieve 24 months, this would be a new mark for us. And so I think, once again, it's incumbent upon us to ensure that whichever process or whichever framework a licensee chooses, that the staff is operating with a sense of urgency, limiting any requests for additional information to the actual safety findings that need to be made, not just questions based on curiosity about furthering their understanding of a design, that we limit the nature of the work that we're doing to actually making a decision based on safety.
Thanks. And Commissioner Wright, anything to add to that?
Well, it's very important that on our side, that we stay within that safety strike zone over home plate, that we don't go beyond reasonable assurance. Once it's established, it's established. I mean, there's some reviews that have to take place, aging management, certain structures, components, safety systems, all that kind of stuff. And siting, there's ways that we have to do certain things. But early engagement is critical in all of this. The more we get done ahead of time and the more we get to resolution, the quicker it happens.
Okay, thank you. And Chairman Hanson, as I talked about us being a leading energy state, particularly in coal production, we have a lot of coal-fire plants, power generation. Some are transitioning. And so some of my folks in my area are talking about transitioning our coal-fired to particularly small modular reactors or to nuclear plants. Could you talk about some of the barriers in the NRC licensing process in converting old coal-fired plants into nuclear power plants?
Congressman, thank you. I'm not sure I'm aware of specific barriers. If you've got a site that has some infrastructure on it and is, reasonably well characterized, I would expect that the environmental review and some other things can be actually more efficient than if you were doing something on a greenfield site. So I'm not aware of specific barriers on that.
So they're not treated different. A greenfield site and an existing power plant wouldn't be treated differently. It's whatever the application is in the safety that the steps we talked about is what's important. Correct. Okay, thanks for that. So Commissioner Caputo, you highlighted the importance of staff leaders who can innovate and cultivate a workforce and culture, striving to ensure the mission of the NRC is carried out. What is the role of the Commission and the role of Congress to support this effort? And any other commissioners could add in. So what's the role of yourself and ourselves to make sure you have the workforce you need?
I think part of it rests with the Commission in terms of the leaders within the agency that the Commission is responsible for selecting. But then below that, I think it's incumbent upon the senior leaders in the agency to cultivate mid-career folks and give them, I think, particular leadership training to prepare them to move into senior roles.
Okay. Anybody else have a couple seconds? Commissioner Crowell?
This is an incredibly competitive field right now, and so it's difficult for a government agency to necessarily compete with the private sector for a limited pool of high-quality candidates. That being said, the mission of the NRC and the relevance of it to solving contemporary issues today, I think should be a draw for a particularly younger set of students.
Thank you, and sorry, my interest is here, is absolutely here. I just want to say that there's another committee going on as well. I have to go back to that. So thank you for your time and effort. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman, and as an honorary Texan, I start to realize how many Texans we have on this committee. I'll go to one now. Mr. Pfluger's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you holding this this hearing in the the spirit of energy security and the ability to have affordable, reliable, dispatchable power is so important for us. And I'll use an example. We recently took a trip where we looked at the ability of our European partners to have affordable, reliable energy. And they're split. The further west you get, with the exception of France, they're turning away from nuclear power. The further east you get, closer to Ukraine, closer to the reality that geopolitically countries like Russia, Vladimir Putin, have used energy as leverage in conflict. The Czech Republic, Poland, and these types of countries are completely turning towards nuclear because they understand it. And my concern, and by the way, let me give a shout out to Abilene Christian University. The research that they are doing is just phenomenal. I'm not too far away from them, although not in my district. 90 miles south is my hometown, and I'm very proud of the work that they're doing. I'm worried about keeping up with technology. And Commissioner Caputo, you put it very nicely, and you stated some hurdles that we have and the emerging technologies and the ability for the NRC to keep up with those technologies. Do you think we're up for the challenge? Are we going to meet the speed of relevancy to compete worldwide?
I think with increased innovation in our procedures and processes, with strong leadership and benchmarking and metrics to track our progress, I think those are key tools to doing exactly what you've asked. I think the expectations that Congress has put on us are very important. I certainly feel a sense of urgency for meeting that. I think one of the most compelling numbers that I've seen lately was just this week, where China and Russia together comprise 70% of the new reactor business happening in the world, and I think that's a very sobering statistic. And a lot of that, the attractiveness for doing business with those countries, lies outside the regulatory realm in financing, et cetera. So our piece of helping America be competitive strongly rests in safety, solely rests in safety. But the more we can do to create timely reviews and ensure that the world can see that the technologies we have been approved by the regulator and put into operation, I think builds confidence in countries that would do business with us, that we really do have the best options in terms of technology and that they're proven by construction and operation here in the U.S.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. We need to export our technology. We do it better. We do it more efficient. We just know this better than anybody else. And you do play a very important, not the entire role, but a very important role in this. And this committee under Chairwoman Rogers' leadership is going to tackle the rest of those issues that are preventing us from delivering it here and having that affordable, reliable baseload power, but also getting it to our allies and partners like Poland, like the Czech Republic, like people who are right next to conflict zones or who know this business. Commissioner Kroll, you mentioned something that has me very concerned about the waste management site, WCS, doing more in Andrews County. And actually, I disagree with that. And I heard discussions about safety, and I've heard discussions about stakeholders. And Chairman Hanson, I'm going to ask you a question here in a second, but I don't think that the process that we went through in Andrews County actually took into account stakeholder community interaction to the degree that it should have. We have low-level waste that's been there for a while. But the community there and the fact that we have the most prolific oil and gas production region in the entire country, probably in the world, I think deserves a permanent solution. We don't need an interim solution. And I know this committee has been asked about that here. Chairman Hanson, do we have a permanent solution in mind? Because that part of the world, we have to be very careful about where we're putting high-level nuclear waste. And I personally not in agreement with doing more, as was suggested. We need a permanent solution.
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. I certainly understand the concern of communities who may be hosting interim storage facilities about those being de facto permanent facilities. And so part of the overall policy need in the U.S. And for Congress and other parts of the executive branch is to formulate that policy, that permanent solution, that then the NRC can come in and evaluate the safety merits of that particular solution.
We would like to see that. It's very important to my district. It's very important to that area of Texas. That the state of Texas has spoken loud and clear about its view on not having that as a permanent site, and a 99-year lease is not interim, in my opinion. That is very much a permanent thing. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Appreciate the gentleman. I now go to Mr. Fulcher from Idaho.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the committee, this has been an educational hearing for me. And something kind of impressed me a few minutes ago. And I looked up the mission statement that you operate on. And I'm abbreviating, but basically it says to license, to regulate, to protect public health and safety. There's nothing in there about anything about efficient development or use. Now, Mr. Hanson, you said a few minutes ago it's part of your principles. It's not part of your mission. So if I got to ask you a question, is any kind of efficiency or development important to you? Is that part of what you do? And if so, give me an example.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, on offices all over the building, we have posted our principles of good regulation, and not only what the words are, but what they mean underneath. I think a good example of efficiency is the Kairos construction permit that we just issued, that we're issuing today. The safety evaluation on that. We did that 3 months ahead of schedule. We were able to track our progress on that and identify and resolve the safety relevant issues very efficiently.
So in my state of Idaho, we've got the Idaho National Lab. Ms. Caputo, I understand you spent some time, or you worked there at some point in time. In discussions with them and stakeholders, there was 3 suggestions that were brought forth that we attempt to try to promote. And I'll just summarize them. I can go into detail if you like, but you'll probably recognize them all. Number 1 is the removal of mandatory uncontested, the mandatory uncontested hearing requirement, which they believe would save up to about 6 months. Number 2 would be removal of a contested hearing on environmental topics. The specific one has to do with the NEPA review, which turns into a series of lawsuits, 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 the analyze, paralyze point of things, or at least restructure that so that the contested hearing on the environmental is at least different. But that's the second recommendation. And I'm going to ask Ms. Caputo to comment on this, and then the chairman, anybody else afterwards as well. But Ms. Caputo, because of your connection with INL. The third one was simplify the contested hearing process, which currently, is, as described by the AEA, goes into great detail in potentially the restructure to where it was more like a legislative hearing process than its current structure. Those are the things which, quite frankly, doesn't do a lot of change the responsibility of your commission, as I understand it. This is all stuff that can be done process-wise. Could I ask you, Ms. Caputo, what do you think of those recommendations? Are they good? Are they not? And if so, why or why not?
Well, I definitely agree with the first one. I think the devil is in the details on the second two. I think there's probably opportunity there, but the details matter, and as long as we are meeting our statutory requirements under NEPA, to the extent that we can reduce the timeframe through streamlining our processes, I would certainly be interested in that. I'd also like to respond to your initial question. I think, you know, I agree with the chairman about the principles of good regulation. I quote those frequently. I think they are really important guideposts for the agency. But I also think that we need to do more within the agency in terms of creating an expectation and setting objectives to achieve more efficient business processes.
Thank you for that. I've only got a minute left. I want to give Mr. Hanson at least an opportunity to talk this too. But in 2008, State Senate, I remember INL coming in and the contractor saying, we're just around the corner on the SMR. We're just around the corner. It was 2023, and we're just around the corner. So we're not making a lot of progress. I look at your mission, and I see the best thing you can do to fulfill your mission is to make sure that we're not efficiently developing or using. Mr. Hanson, your comments.
You're talking about back in 2008?
I'm talking about we're not making progress, at least at the rate where we could be. And I think part of it could be the mission that you're carrying out, which is the best way to protect public health and safety is not to develop and not to use. So we're not. And I'd like your comment on it.
Yeah,
how about those recommendations? We've only got a few seconds.
Yeah, I don't think we should be, and I've said multiple times, we shouldn't be an impediment to the deployment of new nuclear. There are other factors out there, economic, supply chain, and other kinds of issues that impact the marketplace in the U.S.
Mr. Chairman, it appears to me the commission is doing exactly what their mission says they should do. And that doesn't include any kind of efficient development or use. I yield back.
Chairman yields back. Now I'll go to Mr. Dunn for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I also want to thank you for the opportunity to wave onto this hearing today. As my colleagues have mentioned, nuclear energy plays a critical role in American energy security and reliable generation of power. This subcommittee is conducting extremely important work, and I appreciate the opportunity to join you. As you know, Turkey Point is located on the southern tip of the Florida Peninsula. This is a facility that is critical for electrical generation and grid stability in southern Florida. The geography of the area, surrounded by water on three sides, affords limited connectivity with the national electric grid. There really aren't any redundant sources of electricity available locally. The continued operation of Turkey Point is critical to powering South Florida families and businesses and maintaining the electric grid in Florida. While other sites in the United States may have other options, South Florida simply doesn't have one they can turn to. So continued delays in reviewing and processing the Turkey Point license renewal is creating significant uncertainty with no readily available alternatives for power generations. There is no doubt that Turkey Point is crucial to ensuring energy reliability for Florida. However, in 2022, the NRCC, under then-Chairman Brown, upended the NRCC regulatory process, forcing Turkey Point into a new subsequent license renewal process. This is not a new plant. It has been operating for over 50 years in Florida, providing clean and reliable power, and keeping it running is incredibly important to Floridians. Last week, the NRCC again changed the process for Turkey Point, delaying it by at least 4 months. Gentlemen, this is unacceptable. It's imperative that we have regulatory certainty, especially when it comes to our grid security and reliability. Chairman Hanson, has the NRCC considered the impact this delay will have to grid reliability in Florida?
Congressman, the license renewal for the plant, I believe, is the current license is out into the 2030s at this point. So we're talking about the renewal now. The plant continues to operate. There's no immediate impact to the grid in South Florida, and I would expect that review to. I'm not sure of the specific delays. I'd be happy to get back to you.
Yeah, it's not the impression that I'm getting from our power generators in Florida. So another question: what actions do you think you can take going forward to make sure the relicensing decisions get back on schedule? Since you don't know that they're off schedule, we need to follow up with each other on this, because this is a point of some pain and contention.
Thank you. No, I think we can and we should get more efficient on subsequent license renewals as we go through these. And I do agree that we need to risk inform that license renewal review process.
Did you have some input?
Yes, I won't comment on Turkey Point in particular because it's the subject of an ongoing adjudication. But in general, when it comes to subsequent license renewal, the process that Turkey Point is in, license extensions fundamentally hinge on aging management. And aging management programs have been established and in place for decades, and we have significant experience with them.
We're under the impression you keep changing the rules of the game.
That was on the environmental review side. I believe personally that going forward with subsequent license review, given this experience and the established timeframe that these aging management programs have been in place, we should be able to achieve significant efficiencies in subsequent license renewals.
Well, I would certainly like to see that happen. So, Mr. Chairman, what I'm looking for is a commitment that no more delays in relicensing this plant as long as it's performing as per specs.
I'm happy to commit to no additional delays.
Thank you, sir. You may expect to be hearing from other members of the Florida delegation, I'm sure. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Chairman yields back. Now we'll go to Mr. Carter from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to wave on, and thank all of you for being here. This is extremely important. Full disclosure, I'm a big advocate of nuclear energy. As all of you know, the state of Georgia just started up 2 reactors, started up 1, and about to start up another one. We're very proud of that. We feel like it's safe, it's secure, it's reliable, it's clean. We're just very proud of that, and I'm very, very happy that my state continued on with that, albeit through, obviously, as you're aware, a lot of obstacles. But nevertheless, we got there. I'm also encouraged by recent steps that the NRC has approved, and that is the first advanced SMR nuclear design and breakthroughs in fusion. All of those are encouraging to me. So I'm excited, to be quite honest with you, about what the future holds. And I see Europe, and I've been to Europe, and I've been with the Conservative Climate Caucus and witnessed what I've seen over there. Unfortunately, they've made some serious errors in that they've allowed their policies to get ahead of their technology. And a lot of the countries over there, not all of them, but a lot of them have closed down their nuclear plants, and now they're having to revert back to coal and to other forms of energy that they didn't want to have to use as a result of letting their policies get ahead of their technology. But France is a leader in the space. We know that. France is committed to nuclear, so I'm excited about that. And Finland just finished Europe's largest nuclear reactor, so giving them some independence from Russia, and that's certainly something that we've got to be aware of on the world stage, is our reliance on Russia and China. One of the things I wanted to talk about is a bill that Representative Scott Peters, a Democrat, and that I, Republican, have, a bipartisan bill, obviously. It's called the Global Nuclear Energy Assessment and Cooperation Act, and this is a bill that will take a multi-pronged approach to promoting nuclear energy around the world. First of all, it'll prohibit the import of fuels from adversarial nations like Russia and China, and we need to have energy independence, and I think this is a good move on our part. Secondly, it introduces a program, the International Nuclear Reactor Export and Innovation Branch, that the NRC Commission would have to focus on international nuclear efforts, including training and sharing expertise with our allies. We need our allies in this area, and I hope you all recognize that and agree with that. It would inspire coordination, research, and development of the U.S. and our allies so we can create a safe and secure world and have energy independence without having to depend on our adversaries. So I wanted to ask you, Commissioner Hanson, there's a growing appetite for nuclear power around the world, and clearly we'd much rather help provide our allies than Russia and China, who will use them as leverage, and we've witnessed that with Russia already. How does having a robust international market for nuclear technologies benefit the American nuclear industry?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. Let me just say we are working closely with our allies on this. My phone is quite literally ringing off the hook for folks who want to come and interact with the NRC on U.S. technology, and we're providing the kind of training and assistance that you mentioned in our bill. I think as we think about the market pull for standardized designs in reactors, having multiple areas of deployment, whether that's, you combine, if you think about the GE BWX-300, that being deployed both in the US and in Canada, well, that contributes to the economy of scale that makes that deployment very economical. Well, you combine that then with what the Poles are looking at. I'm going to meet with and sign an agreement with my Polish counterpart tomorrow morning, actually, to continue our cooperation there. Then that's an additional market pull that again increases the economics of that, makes the reactors ultimately, I think, cheaper for us domestically, but also then extends our influence. We know that deploying reactors around the world is a 100-year relationship. I think it's important to the United States.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds to me like you feel like the NRC plays an important role in facilitating this.
I've advocated that the NRC should be part of the value proposition in U.S. nuclear exports.
Commissioner Wright, you want to comment on that?
So I mentioned earlier, I was in Romania when the NuScale announcement was made and was visiting with them, and they need our help. And we've got to be timely.
We need them.
We do.
We need each other.
We do. In fact, there was talk that NuScale might be done there before it was built here, and that we would be learning from each other as
Good, good. Well, thank y'all, and please look at this legislation because it is with the best of intentions, and of course I know about intentions, but nevertheless, we need to have energy independence, and nuclear energy is one of the ways that we can have that. And again, I couldn't be prouder of the state of Georgia for what we've done with our nuclear reactors. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Chairman yields back, and seeing there's no further members wishing to ask questions, I want to thank all the witnesses and the commissioners for being here today, for your answers, your comments, your statements. As you see on both sides of the aisle, we're very interested in the propagation of nuclear power across the country to meet Americans' energy needs. We're going to continue to press forward, continue the oversight, but continue to work with NRC for the future of nuclear power in this country. And so in pursuant to committee rules, I remind members that they have 10 business days to submit additional questions for the record. And I ask that witnesses submit their responses within 10 business days upon receipt of the questions. And with that, thank you once again, and we'll stand adjourned.